Game begin.
Hello and welcome back to the Spike Colony podcast, your home for takes of every temperature. Mike, I feel like I have not been hearing any takes, and so I felt like I needed to remedy this by asking people what their takes were. Like, do you realize how much the landscape of Premodern has shifted, where like basically every single day would just be a new take? And like in the last few weeks, there's just been like no takes. People have not been taking takes.
That's weird because there's been so much play. You know?
Exactly. The North American Premodern Championship concludes, and nobody's out there just being like, ban Miri's Guile, ban Rich Shea.
First of all, people have both said ban Miri's Guile and ban Rich Shea.
Not in earnest, right? And like, I don't know, even some of the stuff that I expected, like just stuff that's like, ooh, Spike Colony underrated Enchantress. They thought it was tier 17, and it turns out it's tier 0.
Did I say it was tier 17? What did I put it in my power rankings? I have to go look.
I mean, it does not exist. I don't even think it was on your power rankings. When I just keep it in the, like, you know, it's a deck tier. Like, I don't think I have it in like, I have it in 2. I've Gat, Tide Control, Elves, and Enchantress. And Gat is obviously much too high. Well, I guess I didn't really underrate it. I just didn't overrate it. I didn't underrate it that much. I don't even think I underrate it. I'm like, okay, I don't think it's better than Elves or Tide Control. It might be better than Tide Control. It's not better than Elves.
Enchantress?
Yeah. I mean, the question is if it's better than Goblins or Burn. Actually, here's the problem. My tier list had Terrageddon and Roxer in tier 1, and those 2 decks are scams.
Okay, I never had them in tier 1. I had them in, like, I had Roxer around number 4 and Terrageddon 5. I had Madness 6. What am I thinking? And then Elves.
Yeah, you're just.
I didn't have Enchantress on the list.
You're just clickbaiting by putting Madness anywhere.
It had a lot of
big surprise. Cyberpunker stops playing for a couple months, and what happens to the performance of the Blue Green Madness Survival Madness deck?
I had put it there because I don't remember. It was probably around when Brian had won Grand Prix, Levine, and then also there were just a lot of independent Blue Green Madness finishes that weren't Cyberpunker.
I don't know that that's true. I think you're just saying that. I think the first sentence was true, and then the second sentence is just not true.
So I've always discounted Cyberpunker's performance, so I'm telling you that's where I came from.
I'm telling you that you have always overcounted the performance of the last tournament you attended, and you don't actually spend too much time looking at results or the meaning of results. Because you'll text me, like back in the days when the league was just like league, you'll be like, oh my god, somebody won the 120 player league, and I'm like, no, they didn't win. They are just amongst the people that went 6-0, and sometimes their opponents match win percentage.
The origin story of our friendship was just like, did you make this deck?
Yeah,
it was a Ravager deck.
It's basically it boils down to this: nobody knows what's going on in Premodern, which I actually love, because it gives us a lot of leeway
it is so funny
to make
to me.
takes.
So confident in how I should have played the Stasis match, and then Rich Busey comes out and just like, well, actually, the Vraska Bible says these cards are important.
No, the Vraska Bible says that he has answers, and for like that's not even like a counter to my point. So if we pull back, basically, Muscle Doge Stasis player Hurst is like, you should board out Stasis against Dreadnought. My experience is that I have never lost to Stasis with Dreadnought. I've never had trouble. Had trouble with Stasis against Dreadnought. Like, I would just, I would just win. So these are the 2 data points that I have. You managed to lose to Stasis with Dreadnought.
I did.
Hurst just thinks that it's a good matchup for Stasis. You just have to do steps A, B, and C. So those are all the factors. So in order for you to disprove that Stasis should be boarding out. Should or should not be boarding out Stasis against Dreadnought. You have to be the Stasis player, and you have to try both, and you've done zero of those things.
I'm not espousing a point of view. I'm saying, like, you seemed very confident. All I'm saying is you seem very confident.
I'm confident on behalf of hers, but also, like, I think that it at least speaks to the experience of playing Dreadnought versus Stasis, that if, like, I've never lost the matchup, and the non-Hearst opponents are like trying to like do Stasis to me in games 2 and 3, then there's something afoot.
So I could tell you, I won game 2. But so the thing is, it doesn't matter how I won game 2. I won with 10 Mistress Factory attacks, but I don't think he could win, right? So I had annulled or counterspelled 3 Black Vices and a Felden's Cane, so I don't think he had a way to win left in his deck, right? So it means that intuitively I'm going to win with a Vision Charm, worst case scenario that game, but I happened to attack with 10 Mistress Factories. I lost games 1 and 3 the same way. So I never played into him. The only card I ever played proactively in game 1 or 3 was Powder Keg when I had like 6 or more mana in play. And I just, you just end up stop playing lands at some point. I mean, I just gushed into land drops even at some point, and you just die to Black Vice. There's just the ability to interact is just Powder Keg, and at some point you die to Black Vice.
Yeah, I've nothing of this has anything to do with anything that I have to say. Like, I've at no point that I say that you don't die to Black Vice. In fact, I think the entire strategy of the Stasis deck should be Black Vice plus something else. If it's only Black Vice, it's too easy for the Dreadnought deck to, like, well, it's not too easy, but it just becomes like a question of where the Black Vices are located in the Stasis deck with regards to the counterspells. But at no point was I like, Black Vice isn't good.
Oh, no.
At no point did I say that you lost the game.
No, you said, like,
you lost the game because of...
I think they have a natural advantage against a low land deck when they could just play Black Vice on turn 1.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the good things, but none of this has anything to do with whether or not you should board out Stasis. Like, I think that it supports boarding out Stasis because the card Stasis is not the card Black Vice. It doesn't even particularly help turn on the card Black Vice because Dreadnought can't deploy their hand in any way. There's just the only permanents the deck runs are Dreadnoughts and lands and Powder Kegs, and then other than that you can just like get a Vision Charm out, but the rest of your hand is like cantrips. So the at least plausibly interesting side of this is effectively just trying to have Stasis and Black Vice very quickly at the same time that your Dreadnought opponent has only Impulse, Portent, and AK in their hand.
I don't recall, but I don't think I sided in AK against him.
Yeah, I mean, there's... I would be fine not citing in AK. I would also be fine citing in AK. It just kind of depends. Like, if I had access to like Parallax Tide and Brain Freeze, and I was like going to be doing a more proactive thing, then I would be more interested in AK. But if I had nothing proactive to do, then AK would just be the same as my draw step, right? Because I'm always going to have 7. I'm always going to hand size.
Well, no, not actually, because in order to use the AK, you could potentially be going down in mana in a situation where if your opponent has Stasis, that could be dangerous for you.
Plausibly. I mean, there's some game of chicken there where it's like they could also not have Stasis. And then the other thing is like, well, AK can also gas up your foils. But I think that what you learned in game 2 was that you definitely don't need Dreadnought in your deck. And I think that's like aligned with everything that we know.
I still had 2 Dreadnoughts in my deck in game 3, and I think I probably shouldn't. I just had like any... Look, I think I would have randomly had like the Last Days or something would have been better. I don't know.
It's also important to note that they can't put Dreadnoughts in your graveyard save for using Powder Keg. So more so than against decks with removal, your opponent is going to supply you with copies of Dreadnought 3, 4, 5, 6, and 5 and 6 thanks to their Chain of Vapors. And the only way they're going to put a Dreadnought in your graveyard is via Powder Keg, and of course Stifle interacts favorably with Powder Keg.
Interestingly, but Powder Keg doesn't have any purchase if I don't have any Dreadnoughts, right? That's the only permanent that Powder Keg interacts with. They would need to have Powder Keg against the Manland plan. So let me walk through in 2024 I played against Stasis in the
side event tournament that I won. I had the Mark 1 version of the guide, and going at game 1, I won because I don't even really remember, aside from the fact that like I probably just drew more cards. And a pretty common thing that we kind of talked about at length is that if you're playing Dreadnought versus Stasis, you can Vision Charm out the Black Vice. Yep. And there seems to be some disagreement about whether or not that means that the card Stasis is good or bad. So Andy was chiming in and says it's a good thing that you can play Stasis, then play Black Vice, then get your Black Vice's Vision Charmed instead of getting your library Vision Charmed. And then when they Chain of Vapor it, you have Black Vice again, and you've essentially... This is like an advantageous sequence. And my counter example to that was like, I think that the sequence should be your Black Vice was never Vision Charmed in the first place. If you have Black Vice in play, your opponent won't have access to the Vision Charm endgame. So then they have to resolve Powder Keg, or obviously stop Black Vice from resolving. But again, if Stasis and Black Vice were in play in your Stasis universe, you can assume that Black Vice is plausibly in play in your Black Vice no Stasis universe. Hopefully you're following along. So then when they go to Powder Keg the Black Vice, you have this Chain of Vapor that you're not holding on to bounce Stasises to just bounce your Black Vice. Or you can obviously annul the Powder Keg.
Notably, just chaining the Powder Keg is a non-zero move. I was like pretty surprised. I'm like, oh, that's actually a real thing you could do, because you could just chain the Powder Keg and then play a Black Vice on an off turn, and your opponent has to sacrifice 2 very valuable mana to cast the Powder Keg. That's potentially dangerous for them.
Well, I wouldn't chain the Powder Keg. I mean, I guess if you have Black Vice, Stasis, and you have Chain of Vapor in your hand, and you like, what exactly is the sequence that you're liking?
I think there's a lot of. I think this is really difficult. Like a lot of matchups, you're just like, well, you just do, like most of the burn matchups, you just expect, you do this, and this is how the games go out. There's just so many choices because the cards have so many different modes, and like the strategies can be so different. It's very difficult to say like how the game is going to progress. And the other thing is, I think that there's 2 things that matter. One of them is the Stasis deck can just draw better. Like the good versions of their draws in the first half of the game matter a lot more than the Dreadnought draws in the first half of the game, because just drawing a lot of Gush, for example, lets you just upkeep Stasis for a longer time, if that's
right. This is all you're not even discussing the point. I'm getting a little bit frustrated here because I'm not interested in what Stasis can do, what Gush counterspell. Like, I don't even agree with the premise that the cards can do many things, because the cards are only Chain of Vapor, Powder Keg, counterspells, and cantrips, and I guess win cons. And both decks are actually basically the same decks, where it's like 2 Mistress Factory against 3 Black Vice and maybe a Felden's Cane. And both players have access to Annul. Both players have access to Misdirection. Both the players have access to Powder Keg. Powder Keg is the only way that either player has to remove. Both players have access to Chain of Vapor.
Fundamentally different. The Dreadnought deck has like approximately 10 fewer land. Like, that's an enormous difference in a matchup where one of the decks is trying to win with Black Vice.
It depends. I mean, it could be up to 6 fewer land if you're playing 24 land Stasis and 18 land Dreadnought. And then other than that, I mean, yeah, I do think that Dreadnought's disadvantage, but...
You literally can't cast Impulse to dig for land. That's one of the things. You're just going
to... Again, I don't think that I actually don't think that that's true, because once again, I don't think that you're only living in the world where Stasis is in play at all times, and you're not like speaking to, like, that's the thing, is like you're just fixated on your version of reality, and I'm just saying that there are multiple.
My opponent did.
I don't care about what your opponent did, because I care about the range of what your opponents are capable of. If my opponent wants to play suboptimally, then they're going to open themselves up to exploit, right? If they're going to put themselves in a situation where all of a sudden Vision Charm is something that I can have in my deck. And zooming out a little, you actually have in the original sideboard guide, Dreadnought and Vision Charm are getting sided out. So you wouldn't even have access to your Vision Charm to do some sort of Vision Charm Stasis Black Vice trick.
So I'm leaving in Stifle but cutting Vision Charm?
Yeah. I mean, you have to leave in Stifle because you have to respect Brain Freeze. Which up until, I mean, generally speaking, most Stasis players would have somewhere between 1 and 3 brain freeze post board against Dreadnought. That was like the most popular way for the Stasis player to approach Dreadnought, and it was like so popular that, you know, Hurst decided that he had to level up by having brain freeze and Gaia's Blessing in his deck, which sharp opponents would sharp observers would remember that was exactly how Hurst kind of pulled the rug out from under Aaron Dix in the top 8 of one of the Madison or Milwaukee tournaments by just surprising him with Gaia's Blessing. But that's neither here nor there. Like, I'm not really interested in what happens when exactly the same, what happens when everything that you expect to happen happens. Then of course you're able to take advantage of things that you can take advantage of, and there's parts of your deck that are turned off by that. But like, what if your opponent does something different? Like, what is your counterplay to that? You're just like, oh well, then I would have just been able to do all those things. I'm like, I don't, like, again, you're only speaking to the universe that you are.
I just feel like if my opponent didn't have Stasis in play in game 1 and game 3, I'd have won very trivially.
Right. I don't understand
why you think that Stasis is bad. Like, it would have been super trivial to win both of those games. Like, the problems are, it keeps, you just die to Black Vice.
I'm familiar with how Stasis works. Like, 1, it's a card that you have to resolve. 2, it's a card that you have to feed mana and cards to, and as a result, it does nothing within the absence of Black Vice. So it's basically a combo cards. Like, if you think about the weakness of playing Phyrexian Dreadnought in this world, like, the weakness of playing Phyrexian Dreadnought is that you have to play, you are down a card when you cast it, and then as a result, you have to keep like Vision Charm and Stifle in your deck. Vision Charm and Stifle, of course, make life a little bit hard for you, because they have to sit in your hand. There's not too many ways to advantageously deploy them until you've drawn your Dreadnought. And then once you've drawn your Dreadnought, your opponent starts 1 card ahead. And if your opponent if their deck is constructed entirely of 4 Counterspell, 4 Thwart, and then 4 Annul after sideboarding and 4 Chain of Vapor, that Dreadnought is never going to resolve. So if you flip that on its head, the Dreadnought deck is also 4 Counterspell, 4 Foil, and 3 Annul after sideboarding and 2 Misdirection. So if you're going to try to go for Stasis, and then also you need to use Claws of Gix or Chain of Vapor to turn on that Stasis, and also the card itself doesn't do anything until Black Vice is on the battlefield, then you could just sit there, you're feeding your Stasis all of your cards and mana, and then your opponent starts up a card when they go for the Chain of Vapor on the Stasis. So they only have to answer in that case.
I don't agree with your underlying premise. The Stasis deck can operate without casting its cantrips way better than the Dreadnought deck. The Dreadnought deck is just going to stop playing lands. Like, at some point,
right? But it doesn't. Terminal. Yeah. I understand that there's 18 lands in the deck, but you're not paying 1 every upkeep. Like, the Stasis deck has to pay 1 every upkeep. So at some point in time, like, I guess I don't know how people play Stasis, but the typical way that I see it is that they play Stasis, they play islands. One thing that they do sometimes, which seems insane to me, is exiling islands to Forsaken City. But maybe sometimes you want to unlock that 1 mana. But you want to just sequence multiple untaps. That's exactly. So right. If you have Gush, it doesn't matter. So you put Stasis on the battlefield, and you have, at whatever stage of the game, I mean, maybe you can just do it later. Maybe you can do it once you have 8 islands in play. And then for the next turns that you have land drops or you have cantrips in your hand, you just kind of convert all your land drops and cantrips to mana, but you stay at that number or smaller until you're ready to cast Chain of Vapor on your Stasis. Yeah, I think during that time, if you cast Stasis, you have 6 lands untapped, and you're against a Dreadnought player who, anytime before Stasis, they can cast Impulse for a land drop. Like, that's totally fine. Anytime before Stasis, they can cast Portent for a land drop. They can cast Flash of Insight. They can flash back Flash of Insight. They can do all of the things that their deck is designed to do. At some point, it's very easy for the Dreadnought player. Like, the deck was designed to hit 5 land drops up until it had Parallax Tide. And also, it is worth noting that the original Surf and Surf version was meant to use Parallax Tide in the Stasis matchup as kind of like a proactive hammer thing. I mean, I don't know. It's just very easy to win the game when you tide your Stasis opponent. Or
you could just defend your lands also. That's the other thing you can do, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't spend 4 mana to do it, right? Because you would be defending your. I mean, yeah, you can use it as an untap.
You can just down payment it, and then your opponent can't combo you. That's that's.
But you can just you can use it to untap your lands, and that's fine. But regardless, like this, like the Stasis opponent doesn't get to stop your untap step for free. They have to play cards or mana into it, which means that at the time that they go for Black Vice, that they go for Chain of Vapor, they are going to be at a mana disadvantage, like at a mana or card disadvantage based on like one mana for every turn. So granted, obviously incinerating their spare impulse important at this point is good for them. But even so, like you can get in this fight and they might not have 9 islands for thwart. They might not have 4 mana for double counterspell. They might not have, that's why cards like Misdirection, like whatever, are important. But at the end of the day, you're battling 4 foil and 4 counterspell and 2 Misdirection against like the same. So the question is which player is like doing the first thing that's putting them down a card, and like which player is going to survive from all that. And it's like both decks even have Gush, but the key difference is that Stasis just has Gush to kind of like keep the gears rolling. Gush actually adds mana to the Dreadnought player situation. So the entire game is about Black Vice. Like I just don't the way that I see it, like I would just be trying to play and resolve Black Vice. And obviously I would want something else. Like I would want, like Kane is fine, but I would want Brain Freeze, because Brain Freeze would just make things really simple. And then you're battling over Brain Freezes and Stifles, and Brain Freeze of course can't be annulled.
Yeah, so I think that there's just 2 things. I'm not like radically disagreeing with you. It's just like theoretically there's a similar number of counterspells in both decks and a similar number of like actual ways to win in game 1 in both decks, which gives Dreadnought the natural advantage because it has Vision Charm, but in game 1 anyway. But I think that you might be underrating 2 things. One of which is just Stasis operates better naturally, like without having to do anything. Its deck is just going to come out better. And like what ends up happening in blue on blue matchups across formats is one person gains natural card advantage because the other one has to hand size, and it's just less likely for Stasis to be the first one to have to hand size. So even things like, do I have an extra thing to pitch to a foil, changes because Stasis made a land drop that Dreadnought would have.
I mean, this is kind of debatable because the Dreadnought player can hand size Flash of Insight, and also like the Dreadnought player can hand size Flash of Insight if they have. I mean, in game 1s they have access to like they might just like you might just like launch a Vision Charm for 4, but even so. Like I the way that I see it is like basically the same thing, except for all I'm concerned about is the mana, and I just think that Stasis makes the Stasis player go down on mana.
The big problem is that I think that you might be underrating, like Stasis does geometric damage if it has multiple Black Vice for any amount of time. Like that is a fundamentally different math problem than how
I don't know at any point if anything I said discounts how good Black Vice is. Like you keep on talking about Black Vice like it's Stasis. Like I want to have Black Vice without Stasis because I don't need Stasis to make Black Vice good. In fact, Stasis doesn't really help Black Vice at all. Like if all my opponent is doing is casting cantrips, they're just replacing impulse for whatever the card it is. So the only place where that starts to matter is if they can cast all of their cantrips, if they can just unload all their cantrips, and then they're able to get, quadruple protection against Black Vice, so that when I go for Black Vice, I get hosed by like
that. I think you're just I literally think you're blind spotted on this. It's a race. It's Stasis doesn't have to do, like when I say Stasis, I don't mean the card. I mean like the deck doesn't have to do anything fancy. What it has to do is not lose within the window that the Black Vice kills the opponent.
Right. It's really hard for the Dreadnought player to kill the Stasis opponent because their 2 win conditions are Mishra's Factory, which they run 2 copies of, and it has to get in 10 times, or Phyrexian Dreadnought, which costs them 2 cards to play. Both of those things you're at an advantage of. So if you just think about it, it's like, okay, one person's win condition is maybe Dreadnought, which would be horrible because you should board out your Dreadnoughts. Like if one person's win condition is Dreadnought and the other person's win condition is Black Vice, and they both have access to nearly identical counter suites, this is not discounting the fact that your Stasis deck could contain 4 counterspell, 4 thwart, 2 foil, in addition to 2 misdirection and 3 annul. Like You can annul a Dreadnought. Like, so like annul just ends up being like the only card. Like,
Annul seems pretty great in Dreadnought and pretty mid in Stasis in a sideboard game to me.
I mean, if the only way that your opponent can stop a Black Vice on the battlefield is Powder Keg, annul is amazing. Especially when both players have misdirection.
So,
what do you think that you know that Will Hurst, whose only existence is dedicated to playing this one deck, doesn't? Like, that's just that's like the other thing. It's like I don't even have to like argue this with you because like people who play Stasis, like who like know about the deck and conceivably have a winning strategy versus Dreadnought, do this. Like other Stasis players, I don't think have a winning strategy versus Dreadnought, even in the except for maybe if they have access to Brain
I'm not
Freeze.
trying to like hold out like I'm an expert in the Stasis side. I'm just saying like I lost the match. And
I know what you're saying. I'm telling you at the start I am uninterested. I'm telling you at the start that I'm uninterested in the result of one match that you played. Like the purpose of this podcast is not to discuss like, oh, I played a match yesterday and I drew some conclusions with absolutely no data to go off of that I can't like really apply broadly because like one, I'm playing a deck list that I wouldn't suggest that people play, or two, my opponent was maybe playing a deck list that I wouldn't suggest people would play. Like all I'm asking, like the core question is, do you think that the Stasis player should board out Stasis? And I'm saying that yes.
Very good to me.
Like,
that's what I'm saying to you. I'm saying if he didn't have Stasis in play, it would have been trivial for me to win.
I don't know why you can't I don't know why your brain is incapable of imagining multiple universes that could plausibly exist.
What my opinion is, and I'm telling you, if you
right, but I'm saying your opinion carries no water if like your entire theoretical basis is exactly one time that cards get dealt. Right. This is why I had the entire talk about ranges. This is why the entire analysis is based on ranges.
I don't understand what you're asking me. Like
I'm asking you. Mike. If you play,
there's no way that I won't win.
Mike,
so
if you play,
why would I think it's bad?
You don't play one match of Magic because if you're going to play this Magic, if you're going to play this matchup and you want to have a plan. The goal. I mean, I guess I'll explain it to you like you're 5. The goal is to maximize your equity. Okay, so. If the goal is to maximize your equity, the question is not if the Stasis player boarded out Stasis 2 days ago, whether or not you would have won one match. The question is, if you play 100 matches, 1,000 matches, if you play infinite matches of Dreadnought versus Stasis, and you're on the Stasis side, do you want to board out Stasis? For this, you actually have to extrapolate using your imagination. You actually have to like latch on to factor.
I'm happy to answer the question. Okay, I think Stasis is good. And here are some reasons why. If the Dreadnought deck is allowed to utilize whatever mana it draws naturally to the degree that it wants to by casting all of its cantrips, it can assemble a hand that can answer my Black Vices very easily, right? I need them to not be able to cast all these different kinds of cards, including Flash of Insight and potentially AK, which allow them to have way more resources than I do. The problem that the Stasis deck has is that, like, it's like you're right. Outside of Black Vice and maybe Felden's Cane in this case, or it's just like it's a bunch of wind. If you're gonna say like, let's talk about this in terms of 2 Brain Freeze decks going up against each other, the Dreadnought deck is by far the naturally stronger Brain Freeze deck. You actually have to stop them from being the stronger Brain Freeze deck if that's the matchup that you're in, and Stasis is helpful in that case. Secondly. I think that... Oh,
well, you have to expand on that a little bit. Right? In what way is Stasis helpful in stopping Dreadnought from being the Brain Freeze deck?
So there's 2 things.
I'll start with the first thing. Dreadnought's a better Brain Freeze deck in the Brain Freeze mirror because the Dreadnought deck contains Stifle, and it contains 4 copies of it.
No. There's at least 3 reasons, right? One of them is that it contains Portent. Because it contains Portent, at a minimum, it can stock an 8-card turn instead of a 7-card.
Stasis contains Portent too.
I've never seen Portent in a Stasis deck.
This Portent is stock in Stasis.
I don't know.
Okay, so this is part of the problem is that you don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. Secondly, I want to highlight something here. I want to highlight something here because I actually agree with you. I actually think that it's incredible to me because you need to divorce the things that you're saying from the other. Because for the first like, one, I didn't even want to talk about this. I wanted to talk about other takes that are actually interesting. One, the thing that you said before, and you kept saying is like, oh, I would have won if my opponent didn't have Stasis. One, you don't know that. You don't know if your opponent, instead of drawing the card Stasis, had other things that were good against you. You said you had to foil Black Vice on turn 1. That sounds like a horrible start. Like,
I had to do it. I'm dead.
Maybe, yeah, you lost. You won a counter battle against a Felden's Cane. Maybe if your opponent had one more piece of material that would have resolved the Felden's Cane, then you would have lost once again, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's fine. Like, all of these things, regardless if that's true, I don't care. The thing that you said next actually addressed my point, which is, hold on, no, let me finish the thought. All I'm saying is, like, the thing that you said next was not the same thing as I would have lost, right? Or I would have won. The thing that you said next was actually pretty astute, and that I just generally agreed with, which was just like, yes, maybe if your opponent doesn't put Stasis into play, then you have completely free range to sculpt your hand, hit all your land drops, and put the Dreadnought player in a position where if the fight comes down to whether or not Black Vice resolves and stays resolved, you're able to play the kind of game you want where you can, like, play Powder Keg, fight over Powder Keg, reload, play a null targeting Black Vice, or play Chain of Vapor targeting Black Vice, like, do the things that you want that the Stasis player might not be able to match. Now, that is actually interesting, because to that I would actually say it's like, okay, well, let's just say you remove 4 Stasis from your deck and you just have those same card advantage tool. You're also 4 Portent, you're also 4 Impulse, and you also have either Accumulated Knowledge or Flash of Insight. 7
performing Stasis decks on TC decks. 1 had 2 portents, 1 had 3 portents, 5 had 0 portents. So just to answer you, 1 had 3 portents, not a single one had 4 portents. Most of them had 0. So are you validating the thing that I just said? It's not going to come up different than what I just said to you.
I mean, I have to pull it myself. That's just news to me. But yes, if in that case where the Stasis player has neither Portent or Flash of Insight, then the possibility of the Dreadnought player stacking up Portents and going for Brain Freeze turns is much
fundamentally stronger Brain Freeze deck because you can stockpile cards, right? So a play that I made was to cast multiple Portents in a single turn, right, where I didn't change the top cards in my library, so that I could stockpile the next 2 draws, right, that were going to happen on my opponent's turn. Right, that was actually the first time I've ever done that in my life. I felt pretty smart. Okay, so that's so that's one thing. Second of all, the fact that you have Vision Charm in one deck and not in the other deck is pretty meaningful if it's going to come down to Brain Freezes, because Vision Charm is not only a 1-mana cantrip. 1-mana spell that you can catalyze Brain Freeze with. It actually helps the strategy at the same time, right? And then third, and most importantly, Dreadnought is a more cantrip sort of card draw, 1 and 2 casting cost card rich deck because it plays fewer lands. That's actually good if you're trying to beat somebody with Brain Freeze, especially if you can set up with a Gush. Like, all those things, if you're just going to play a straight Brain Freeze mirror, are valuable from the Dreadnought side, even before you start talking about the fact that one deck has Stifle and the other one doesn't, right? So
I'll stop you right there, which is just that, like, if I am playing the Brain Freeze deck, right? So, like, one of the lists that you're pulling, or most of the lists recently, are coming from one pilot, which is Heart L.
I skipped down.
Who's basically just been playing a list that contains one main deck Upheaval, which of course I know you're gonna love.
It seems kind of mid to me. Like, I don't know.
Like,
why would I? These 2 things don't make any sense.
You don't want to 10 your opponent with Black Vice. Okay, regardless.
I mean, like, this is like this when pilot, I had Flying Glaciers in my Stasis deck. Like, oh, this could be good in some.
All right, so this is an important thing, because people need to learn how to build decks, and it drives me crazy when they don't build decks. Like, right? So you said something very astute, which is that if you're the Brain Freeze deck, you want to have Portent. So Heart L is playing 1 Brain Freeze sideboard in 0 Portents. If I was going to put Brain Freeze in my Stasis sideboard, then I would put Portent in my Brain Freeze main, like in my Stasis main deck, right? That would make a lot of sense. Aside from the fact that Portent is just like a good card in Stasis, because I don't know, there's a lot of reasons.
I just looked at 3 more Stasis decks that weren't Heart L. None of them had Portent in them. I haven't seen more than 3 Portent.
Well, no, I mean, in
decks that had
Mike, for the purpose of what you're posing, which is that one deck, like this is going to be a brain freeze mirror. The Stasis player has agency to understand that they are going to be playing brain freeze mirrors if they put brain freeze in your deck.
But I'm just saying, nobody's playing
Mike.
Lanny. Your underlying argument was everyone has Portent and brain freeze.
No. I'm changing it, which is just that, like, okay, fine. If like my argument would be like, my argument has changed, right? If you're not playing. If one, not everyone is playing 0 Portent, 3 brain freeze, right? Or 2 brain freeze. But if you're going to play brain freeze in your sideboard, you should be running Portent in your main deck for exactly the reason. You should be running Portent in your main deck. It actually drives me insane that these decks are starting with 0 Portent. Like in general, I haven't heard of that from the Stasis Cabal. I listened to the whole podcast episode, and at no point had anybody said
doesn't seem very good
that we're playing 0 Portent. I mean, right? I think it's good. Like, Portent is a good card. It's better than the next best cantrip. And it's
drawing an island is much better than paying a mana to draw an island in this deck.
I do agree with that. And I think that naturally, like, looking at 4 cards for the card Stasis when you need the card Stasis is like better than not. Like Stasis ends up going into multiple modes, right? One is that, like, if you're under like any sort of duress, you kind of have to put together Stasis naturally. And I thought that the most interesting version of the deck was at least when Chris Roy played 24 lands. He played 0 Black Vice, which at the time I thought was interesting, but I think
playing Adrian Sullivan's list.
I don't know, but no, they're not from the same area. Chris Roy was playing in the Northeast, but. Regardless of that, he was just like playing more lands and less Forsaken City, which I thought made a lot of sense because you kind of like Forsaken City is good, but if you draw 4 of them, then you just like don't get to operate as like a blue deck. I mean, that's like the other thing is like if you're playing like what I want to pull from this discussion is not a question of whether Michael J should have done anything differently and won this week. It's not a question of if if we should take this exact 75s that were played that day. It's just a question of like, what is the best Stasis deck you can build if you want to beat Dreadnought, and what is the best Dreadnought, like, and if Dreadnought's the incumbent, so you wouldn't necessarily like tech your Dreadnought deck against Stasis, but like, what are the considerations? Because I also just don't think that every Dreadnought deck or any Dreadnought deck should be playing Brain Freeze at this point in time.
So I was thinking about this in anticipation of you having a question like that, which is like, you were like, oh, I don't think I would have played Dreadnought without Tide, right? So I just had the Hootenanny kind of Rochester Royals deck built, right? 74, 75 of Raska's deck that he came in second place with. And so I just I'm randomly played that. I was very happy with the Dominate AK sideboard in my other 2 matchups. So I was like pretty, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm happy this, like it turns out that not having Tide was maybe bad in the Stasis matchup, but having AK Dominate was great in the other 2 matchups, right? I sided.
Yeah, you're allowed to play AK Dominate and Tide in the same deck. I give you permission to do that. I give everyone permission to do that. That's what I do. Like you can just build a deck. Like you don't have to copy and paste.
You have to put AK in your main deck if you're going to do that. You don't have time. You don't have room for all this.
You can or you can't. I mean, if you don't want to, you don't have to. I would recommend that. I think that it's been shown to like be something that you do without significant loss to your deck, as evidenced by the number 2 placing player at Lobstercon, the largest pre-modern tournament of all time.
Well, I think that it seemed to me like the matchup was naturally in Stasis's favor, and I felt like stuff had to go my way in order for me to win. You know what I'm saying? Like if everything just goes normal, like on both sides, I think that they have the advantage. That was my guess. Because they have Chain of Vapor, which is good against Dreadnought, and they have Black Vice, which is good against decks that are stuck with 7 cards in hand all the time. And the card Stasis, like I was saying before, is very good at restricting a deck that requires using especially 2 mana cantrips and card drawing to operate from just operating with impunity. If the Dreadnought deck can operate with impunity, that's bad for Stasis. Among other things, they're in a better position to drop cards out of their hand, even by burning cards in order to get under Black Vice, right? Stasis makes that difficult. Like you can't just like you have some game situations where your natural inclination to gush is to gush main phase. Obviously, that's something you're typically not going to do against Stasis. But, gush main phase, impulse main phase to hit land drops. You can't do stuff like that if your opponent has Stasis in their deck. It's very dangerous. And I think even the threat of that happening is something that a Dreadnought player has to be wary of.
Yeah, but your paradigm just shifts, right? Like you don't gush main phase because you're not casting anything main phase, so you don't get any. I
phase a bunch because I needed to, right? Like that was a I'm gonna bet 7 cards.
Again, I don't know that's good for you if that's the case. I mean, there are obvious problems with that, which is yes, you do have to empty out your hands, but you don't gush to find your land drops, right? It's better to gush on their end step than it is to gush main phase. But aside from that, I mean, your paradigm just shifts where you just hold your gushes for your foils, so you can play the turn where you have one gush turning on 2 foils and win a counter war over Black Vice or whatever. Like I think it's like the way that I see it is that one, it would be like pretty checkmate for the Stasis player to just like be the Stasis player and like not have Stasis in their deck, and they can cast their cantrips, which they should have in their deck. Like I guess if the prototypical Stasis deck, which again I'm like looking through all these deck lists, and I guess this is an archetype where people just simply cannot agree on like what cards should go in it beyond Stasis and Chain of Vapor and Black Vice, and even Black Vice is debatable. But my image of the
Mistaken City,
between how many copies, right? I think 4 is pretty.
The correct answer is 4.
I think 4 is pretty bad, but again, people can't agree, so whatever. But in this world, like
single deck that had 4 Portent.
I mean, they should.
I'm not saying if they should or not. I'm asking.
No, I haven't seen one with 4 yet. But
I saw one with 3. I saw.
Yeah, there's a few with 3.
Most with 0.
But also, some of these are like 100th place. So
I was looking at the ones that were performing.
I know.
I didn't.
It's just really hard to click. No, so what I
1 out of 14.
So what I no. So what I want to emphasize here.
114 out of 116.
What I want to emphasize here is what I'm looking for is somebody who got like top 8 out of like 32, and there's just not that many. So it's really
not a popular.
It's really hard to aggregate what the good Stasis deck looks like. But regardless. I mean, just hear me out. So like, let's just play a game where why don't we just play a game where we like no Black Vice is center to our game. If we draw it on turn 1 and we can just draw it and play it on turn 1 through a null or through whatever, that's really good. But if we draw it on turn 10, we can play a game where we just like play Black Vice, we fight the counter war of our Black Vice, and then we cap it off with Brain Freeze. Like, doesn't that sound pretty good?
Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, it depends. It depends what the other guy's deck has, right? So, like, I think there's part of me that says that Felden's Cane's better than Brain Freeze if you're going to be in this fight, because, like, imagine you just don't get your Felden's Cane Brain Freezed, right? Like, obviously, if you're
that's one of the problems, yeah.
Freeze, right? Like, okay, that
or Stifle interacts with it the same.
Yeah, so that's also very bad, right? But like
with the one addition that if you are playing Felden's Cane, then it will signal to your opponent that Stifle is important, unless you're holding it for the turn that you get a bunch of value from it.
So if you're just going to be in this Brain Freeze shootout, I feel like Felden's Cane is better because like now I have 6 or 8 Black Vices. Now I have 8 Gushes. Like, that's really potent in a very different way, and your opponent actually has a terminal ceiling, like that. They're gonna run out, and you're not gonna run out. Like that's pretty meaningful,
right? I mean, there's
again
the big difference:
annulled, stifled, or brain freeze.
Yeah, the big issue is one of those 3 things, but like the most important part is that counter spells don't interact favorably with brain freeze, right? So like if I'm playing Cane Vice and like my goal is to resolve Cane, then Cane is just another Vice, right? It's just like another card that does the same thing.
It's a way to win, yeah, sure.
Right. Whereas like if I have Brain Freeze Vice, then I have Brain Freeze, which interacts favorably against counter spells, whereas Vice doesn't interact favorably against counter spells.
Well, I mean, I feel like part of me is just like Vice is really easy to resolve, right? Like that's what it's cheap. You can cast it early, right? In the case that you have Vice, and so there's 2 universes, right? Like one is like I got Vice. if I'm in the universe of I Got Vice, like I think that my mode of play should be different than in all other universes, right? Because in the universe of I Got Vice, and my opponent is full of gushes and impulses, and
yeah, if my opponent is playing blue, yes, I like that universe. Yeah,
not like I just do nothing. My opponent dies, right? They can't get cards out of their hand.
Right, we fundamentally agree on what the card Black Vice does. Yeah.
That's actually no, but like your mode of play, like I think that like it's probably pretty good for your opponent to do stuff like counterspell and impulse if you have Black Vice in play.
Yeah,
right. So there's that, and then there's all other universes. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be like the optimal Stasis player, if I'm going to play for the universe where I got reasonably but a little lucky, or I try to usually play for the vast majority of games where I didn't get lucky and I have to execute on my plan.
What are the odds? What are the odds that 1 of 3 copies of Black Vice are in the top 18 cards of your deck?
Right, so
I assume that it's greater than 50%, but like my point is that you can play.
Kind of have to be on the play against a deck with a null.
No,
right?
You don't have you don't have like your illustration of this universe is like extremely one-dimensional, which is just if you have Vice on turn 1. Like you can actually play for a deck like the Dreadnought deck literally exists in exactly this universe, which is just like sometimes Dreadnought is within the top 10 cards rather than the top rather than your opening hand, right? Like Stasis can just be the same deck. Like if you're on the play, like the Dreadnought player, maybe they get some cantrips. Like you can still be in a world where you just like on turn 3 you have Black Vice with counterspell thwart backup. Like is that really that hard for you to imagine putting together with your should be portent and some amount of impulse deck? Like this arcane denials and dazes are just driving me completely insane.
Do you know the story of Masks Block Constructed where it was all rebels and there was all these rebel fights, and then one day I declared that we were just going to side all the rebels out, and then that was the thing everyone did. Do you know this story or no?
No.
So, Justin Poland, he ended up being my writing partner at one point, but he has a Grand Prix top 8 in South Africa. I'm playing him in a PTQ, and I played a Ramosian Sergeant on turn 1, and I beat him. We were playing the Rebel Mirror, right? And he's like so embittered. He's just like, you just got a first turn Ramosian Sergeant. That's the only reason you won. I said, no. I'm so much better than you, and my deck is so much better than you. I'm going to side all my rebels out, and I'm going to beat you anyway, right? He's like, shut up. So then I beat him in game 2, and then I'm like, I beat you. I told you. And he's just like, shut up. And I showed him I had sided all my rebels out, right? I beat him anyway. So then after that, it just became the thing to side all your rebels out of the Rebel Mirror. And Chris Bakula famously was just like, I just beat the shit out of this guy with Ramosian Sergeant, right? How can it be right to side out Ramosian Sergeant? And I'm like, but you're going to do it. He's like, I'm going to do it. Right. So the reason that it became, I'm going to put this in air quotes, right, where it's like people had cards like Rebel Informer, which were really good against other people's rebels. You have like Parallax Wave and, all like Magetta the Lion. Like we're just like good at killing creatures. Right. So instead I was just like, what if we just had only disenchants? Because like if the best card in the format is Parallax Wave, we just have like 100 disenchants and figure out a way to win. And people were winning with Wrath's Edge. That's like a land that if you sacrifice a land, you can ping someone for 1, or like just 3/3s, or just tagging with 3/3s for 5 because they were resilient against Parallax Wave. But I feel like there's some tension here, which is you're just like, oh, I think you should just do this thing, which is like me being like, I sided all my rebels out. And that's a thing everyone ended up doing. But I did it as a joke to begin with, right? And then it became a meme. But like, I don't know if it was right. That just turned out to be the thing.
I don't even think it's like that hard to imagine though. That's like the distance between our points of view is like a little bit surprising to me, because like, I just don't understand like why you think that the Stasis deck can't have access to the same card advantage. It typically actually has access to more counter spells, right? Like a lot of these decks are going to play,
yeah, but like you said, if this becomes a brain freeze shootout, which it wasn't because neither of us had brain freeze,
we can bring it back to down to earth. I mean, I do think that if you wanted to make the argument, like if you wanted to make the conversation a little bit more productive, the conversation should be based around, can you win with the Stasis deck without having Brain Freeze in your sideboard? But the thing that makes it like really hard is that like the reason why I'm ragging on you for managing to lose the Dreadnought side is that you think that the Stasis deck is just naturally favored. If that's the case, the Stasis player just doesn't have to do anything. But that just hasn't been my experience. Like, generally speaking, I mean, it's obviously hard to separate because like there's just not a lot of stasis.
Comeback might be because they're idiots who take their stasis out. Like, what if I just said that? Yeah, they're a moron who took their stasis out. Of course you won. Like, there's that has more value to me than
right. But that just becomes the question of like, well, one generally the taking stasis out is the less popular thing. Like the reason why when Rich was bringing up the Vraska sideboard plan, which is just like, oh, you just contain stasis and Black Vice, you know, it's just because it's based on the assumption that your opponent is going to be having stasis. And the other thing is, you can play like these are things that I hold to be true. Maybe they're more nuanced than that. But this is just basing off what Hurst talks about, like what Hurst talks about when he talks about stasis. He's just like, stasis doesn't matter. Black Vice matters. What does he mean by that? It's like, well, if there's a stasis in play and there's no Black Vice in play, then you just play on. Both players just have attunement that they are spinning every turn, except for the stasis player is losing 1 mana or 1 card every turn, and you're only losing a card if you miss your land drop, right? So even if your deck doesn't contain very many lands, like I've played my Grotog deck, which contains 17 lands, it also contains gushes. It just doesn't matter because I kind of sit there, I wait until I have Ray of Revelation plus Counterspell, and then I can remove the stasis on their end step. I unlock all my mana, and then I just like do I do anything. I play Meddling Mage, I do whatever. So that's like one of the things. So like it only becomes a problem if your opponent has Black Vice. So from the Dreadnought side, you can even just hang out under stasis, and if your interaction is like you have a couple of islands and you have Gush foil, you can just and you have a null. I mean, if it's post sideboard, you have a null. You can just like let them have the stasis. You can counter the Black Vice, like focus on all your counters on the Black Vice. Maybe they even like Chain of Vapor to unlock their stasis to get them more turns. Then you have an opportunity to like be like, okay, maybe I can decide to fight this counter war with the stasis on the way back down. I can decide whether or not I want to fight over the Chain of Vapor. I can decide to use my own Chain of Vapors, which you said you didn't have because you're playing like the non-Chain of Vapor version, right? I mean, that's the other thing, because the version that you have is just 2 powder kegs in the main deck and maybe 1 in the sideboard.
There's 2 powder kegs in the main deck.
Yeah, is there 1 in the sideboard? But there's like 0 Chain of Vapor or Boomerang or Hoodwink.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's like the other problem. But that's neither here nor there. Like you can effectively ignore stasis until the point that your opponent has Black Vice. Now, you don't have to I'm not saying you have to ignore stasis. If like your opponent plays stasis and you have like, I don't know, 6 power of attackers on the battlefield, then sure, fight the stasis. Like if you have a Dreadnought on the battlefield, like you can fight the stasis. But if you have nothing going on, then nothing really changes except for like you shouldn't cast Impulse. Like countering stasis so that you can cast Impulse ends up being just like, you know, it's not necessarily the same. Like it's not necessarily that big of a deal because at that point you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm not casting Impulse. Instead of casting Impulse, I'm just going to discard it. I'm going to see the next 4 cards in my deck naturally anyways.
So, I mean, in a universe where the stasis player has stasis, right? They have the agency of whether or not they want to cast stasis. Okay. And like, as the most easy example, right? If the Dreadnought player is hand sizing, right? Because they don't naturally have access to their lands or they have to use cantrips to get their lands, right? And you have like 3 lands in your hand, or you have a thwart, right? Like, which allows you to like proxy into land drops after you've committed mana. Like this might be opportunistic for you. And then what ends up happening is you get to a point where like the Dreadnought's just hand sizing a bunch, and then the problem for them is like, I'm going to cast a 1 mana Black Vice and you're going to cast a 2 mana counterspell unless you have an annul, right? Like this starts to be a serious problem for you if you're the Dreadnought player. Like, and I think that like you're just like, this universe doesn't exist. I'm like, that's the baseline universe. I'm
not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying in that universe, like your mana advantage is hurt by the fact that you have to spend 1 mana or 1 card every turn to upkeep stasis.
But like, what I found, right? Because, you know, look, I've never, you know, actually that's not true. But at least in this match, right? My opponent had an overabundance of cards because they cast Thwart. But they have Thwart, and like it doesn't matter how many islands you have in play once Stasis is in play. The only island that matters is the one that's going to pay for the Stasis, right? So you could have 3 tapped islands or 40 tapped islands. They have the same efficacy unless
right. But that's my point. My point is that if I have 40 untapped islands and 7 cards in hand, that's better than having 33 tapped islands, 7 untapped islands, and 7 cards in hand. Like if I have 7 cards in hand, I want all my islands to be untapped. Like so what you brought up, I think maybe obliquely to this is at least very interesting, which is like, okay, well, what if the Stasis player had Stasis in their deck? Maybe they didn't play 4 copies, but they just simply didn't cast it. Like they didn't cast it until anything happened. Like they just waited until they had, something like 13 or 14 islands in play, and they just never cast it. They have to fight over Parallax Tide. That's conceivably a problem. If the Dreadnought players still have Dreadnoughts in their deck, then you have to fight over Dreadnought. Hopefully they don't have.
Actually, is a pretty good counter to Dreadnought.
Well, that's my point, right? But you just don't have to cast it. And then if they have Brain Freeze in their deck, this strategy is awful. If they have Brain Freeze in their deck, all of your strategies besides keep being faster than them with Black Vice become really bad, right? So then you could just never cast Stasis and then, wait for your opponent to like attack with Mishra's Factory once. And then you would be playing a different kind of game. But like my thesis is just that like if you're playing draw island go in your like blue control deck, it is better to be playing draw island go than be playing draw, tap an island, play an island go. Like because at some point both players are going to be unloading some amount of cards that cost mana in their hands. And it's not like none of your cards cost mana. And you're right, Black Vice is a great card if your opponent doesn't have a null, because you can trade 1 for 2. But it's even better if you just have access to untapped mana. Like if you're playing a blue control mirror, the player with more mana and enough cards to cast them, right? Or enough cards and enough mana to cast them is going to win. So then it just becomes a question of like, okay, well, what's the texture of the deck?
These are literally all reasons why people shouldn't play Portent and reasons why Stasis is good. Like everything you've said is why you shouldn't play Portent and why Stasis is good. So I don't understand why you're on the other side for Stasis.
Well, okay, I don't think we're gonna get. I don't think we're gonna get any further. What deck do you think is favored? You think Stasis is favored, and you think that Stasis should keep in Stasis?
I think it depends on your lists. I think of the lists that showed up that night, Stasis was not dramatic.
Well, you looked at like 10 Stasis lists. So what do you think about those lists versus Dreadnought?
I think against the deck that I played, which has no Chain of Vapor, I think Stasis is slightly favored. I think that...
Right, because you only have... I mean, that is kind of the huge problem, which is that your only way to stop a Black Vice on the battlefield is 2 copies of Powder Keg, and that's horrible.
Well, the problem is, in games 1 and 3, the only proactive cards I played were Powder Kegs. Okay. And I had
you're banned from talking about what happened in the games. Thinking into the future... Your deck contains 2 Powder Kegs. That seems to be a liability into a deck that has between 3 and 4 Black Vice.
I'm never going to metagame against Stasis, right? That's not the,
Right, that's fine. But you can answer the question if it's better to have Chain of Vapor against Stasis or not, right?
Well, just having access... Is the question having access to Chain of Vapor or not good against Stasis? The answer is obviously yes.
Yeah, obviously. So, like, all I'm saying is like
somewhere in my 75 is it? Yes, it is.
Right. So, you made a very obvious statement, which is just that Hootenanny Blue, which is Tideless, aka in the sideboard, Dominate Dreadnought, is worse against Stasis than other builds of Dreadnought. What do you think Stasis's outlook? The last 10 good performing lists that you look at, what do you think the outlook is against stock Mono Blue Dreadnought with Tides in the sideboard, or Justin's Mono Blue Dreadnought?
I think that if I actually, after this, I considered, like, I'll play Stasis in a league next week, maybe, right? So I own the cards, whatever. I think Stasis is probably well positioned if it's prepared. It has mana advantage.
And if it plays Portent.
It has. I wouldn't play Portent for the reasons that you stated. It's not good, right? There's a reason.
Well, what if you have Brain Freeze in your sideboard?
I wouldn't have Brain Freeze. I think that I would rather play Mana Short, which is better against people who are actually trying to beat me.
Yeah, I think Mana Short is an interesting one that Will said that he's not playing recently, which I find very surprising because it's kind of fundamental to stopping a replenish type deck, which can like replenish can choose not to cast anything and only play lands, and Mana Short helps interact with that
until they get you right. And also they have so many tools, right?
I mean, it's complicated. Like obviously Seal Cleansing is good, but generally speaking, Stasis should
Frantic Search is good.
I mean, Frantic Search is a kind of a big liability because you still have to tap mana for that Frantic Search. There's no guarantee that it resolves.
It might not land. Yeah, sure.
I mean, I don't want to get into Stasis' entire matchup spread, but generally speaking, most Replenish players have not found Stasis to be a great matchup. I think Replenish can play the matchup in a way that helps them. I think having Orm's Chant is good, but like, yeah, if the Stasis player has Mana Short, that's like pretty lights out for Replenish, especially if your only interaction with Mana Short is Mana Leak. So
here's my like 10 words on Mana Short. Doesn't matter if you win the counter war over Mana Short. If you lose the counter war over Mana Short, you won the counter war.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. That is the function of Mana Short.
So like, oh, you have 2 open, Stasis, counter spell, cool. Stasis, you're dead.
I mean,
right?
against Replenish, I think I would like it became interesting because when I tested the rock against Stasis, I found it was like pretty navigable from the rock side, and the reason was simple, which was like, once again, just like don't do anything. Just don't do anything. They have to do something every turn that you don't do anything. You
Lanny rock or what kind of rock?
Lanny rock, yeah. It's like
because like
you just don't do it. You just don't do anything until you can like
rock. Only has 20 land. You actually have to do things or you're just going to die.
Well, you can play Wall of Roots, Birds of Paradise. Like, you can't call it a 20 land deck and not be like, Wall of Roots, Birds of Paradise are pretty good against Stasis.
Wall of Roots is one thing. It doesn't tap. Birds of Paradise is a land I had to pay mana for.
You can cast the Birds of Paradise off the Wall of Roots. Problem solved. But regardless, that matchup was like pretty simple because like if you had Pernicious Deed, you would just be like sit there, not do anything.
That's why I asked what version
you would cast.
Obviously, if you cast a turn 2 Pernicious Deed, it's pretty hard for them to win.
Right. But what they can do is have access to Mana Short. And I don't know. If you play Stasis next week, are you going to play Stifle in your Stasis list?
I don't know. I was thinking I would just play like a pretty stockish 3 or 4 Black Vice main deck, Mana Short and Felden's Cane, right? Like Mana Short just seems to me like the better version of all of these strategies because
would you board in Mana Short against Dreadnought?
Probably not. They don't have any land. Maybe I'd board 1 or 2. I don't know. I don't know what my whole 75 is going to look like yet. Right? I think that I'd try to fight their plan A.
I feel like you didn't see the match where Brian Selden had 9 islands in play against his green-white oath opponent who had 0 lands in play and a Sphere of Resistance. Like, you keep on saying Dreadnought doesn't have any lands. Like, Selden boards down to 16 lands in that matchup and still hits 9 straight land drops. And it's not really particularly difficult.
I did watch that match, and it was a function of him casting, like, about 115 Flash of Insights. Right? Like, I don't think you can do that against Stasis's plan A. One of the reasons why I like Mana Short, and also I don't know that I would side them all in against Dreadnought, is because I want to preserve my plan A. Like Mana Short actually unlocks your plan A. Like, if you have Mana Short in your deck, Stasis...
Yes. I think you should play... Yeah, I don't disagree with you that you should have Mana Short and Stasis at the same time. Like, you should consider Stasis if you have Mana Short, or you should consider... Like, that's why I asked the question. Yeah. Would you Mana Short your Dreadnought opponent?
I don't know what my 75 looks like yet. Maybe. I don't think I'd bring them all in. I think I'm planning like around 3.
You're gonna have 3 Mana Shorts? Okay, that's pretty spicy. I like the sound of that. I wish you good luck. I want to get to the takes. I actually don't really give a shit that much about Stasis, but I think it's at least helpful for process. Like, I really want to focus
7 minutes talking about
I really want to focus. No, it's fine. I actually like and this is not a dig at other pre-modern content, but I think that, like, you know, for all the yelling and the aggrievement of our listeners, the purpose of us having this discussion is to nail down on process. And we're not great at it, but at least we're doing it. And I think there's some element that I crave from pre-modern content. It is to talk about process. So I like deck techs and I like talking like deep dives into matchups, even if they're matchups that 95% of our listeners won't play and definitely don't want to play. Except for like, the sickos who love blue mirrors. For what it's worth, I do think that the matchup is, at least quite interesting. I think every matchup with Stasis is quite interesting because like there's no like good heuristics for Stasis v anything, because most decks, when they think about their game plan, it just generally involves them having access to their untap step. So basically you can like write a guide for like how to play this deck, and then like you need to write a separate guide for how to play this deck against Stasis. And furthermore, that's what makes Stasis is a good deck, because it's like a very exploitive deck. Not a lot of people understand how they're supposed to behave against Stasis.
I'll give you some free tech, like all of our listeners, some free tech from back in the day. This is an advantage I have from knowing about decks from back in the day. You know what the best card is against Stasis?
Thawing Glaciers.
Everyone can play.
Thawing Glaciers.
No, it was not good. That one was not good.
Although
I might play it in my Stasis deck this time.
You would play it in your Stasis deck, yeah.
Yeah, for the.
Would you play it in your Dreadnought deck for the Stasis matchup?
No, that does not seem good.
But you said the problem was lands.
that land both comes into play tapped and costs me mana. The best card is Winter Orb, because even if Stasis is operating and they bounce their Stasis, they're still stuck. Right?
So you don't think in that situation they would sacrifice an island and bounce your Winter Orb at the same time?
All right. I guess maybe it's not quote unquote the best. It is a card.
Yeah, let me tell you about some tools we have since back in the day. Since back in the way day turned into the day. One of the
reasons I like Stasis is nobody's playing elves at the leagues.
Yeah, well, now that they've listened to this podcast, that it'll be the perfect time for them to leave it up.
But so it's
then you just play. Then you figure out your anti-elves plan.
Oh, I was thinking about that. What do you think is better? Maybe you have to have both, like
Hibernation, Curse Totem,
and you have to have both,
and Pyroclasm.
Pyroclasm and Stasis.
Yeah, you haven't seen any of Ricky Thorson's red sideboard.
I'm not sacrificing my Gush equity.
You don't have to. You just cast it off your Forsaken Cities, and you just like board in the Dargaz's Caldera or whatever. I don't know. You figure it out. You run Portent so you can find your red source.
Not playing Portent's bad.
Portent's amazing.
You are such a Portent believer.
Yeah, because it's the best cantrip in Premodern, and every blue deck should play it instead of at least like 2 lands, unless they're playing 7 colors. So to close the loop, I like talking about process because I like talking about how these kind of questions have different implications. So even if you're not a Stasis player, I think it's important to ask yourself questions like, okay, if I'm going to be playing this like brain freeze situation, does it behoove me to play a card like Portent or Flash of Insight, where I normally wouldn't like those cards as much if I didn't have brain freeze, but because I have brain freeze and the target of brain freeze are these blue control decks, all of a sudden having the access to go for these big turns where you have access to extra cards is really important, becomes a thing. The weird thing about brain freeze in Stasis is that it's kind of hard to press the action. You have to like you don't do anything, so you're just like
just saving up.
Gush, impulse, like ideally you go for Black Vice and then you fight the counter war over Black Vice, but this becomes awkward if your opponent is just gonna like wait till your end step and then disenchant and then untap and disenchant.
Let me tell you how, like, I haven't played this yet. This is just how it's going on in my head. Okay, that seems super hard to do because I'm doing all of this on my own turn, right? Yeah, like that's the only way that it works.
Well, that's the only way that you do it with extra cards, unless you're going to do it on their turn with a well-timed upkeep Flash of Insight for 20.
Oh my god, isn't it just so much simpler for me to pick a fight with mana short? Then I don't have to have 100 other cards, and I might win and I might not, and it doesn't matter.
Yes, like, I would play short. Yeah, I would
so
short.
much better to me.
I would also short my opponent.
That you said about brain freeze. Yeah. I'm just gonna play a Felden's Cane, hope it doesn't get brain freezed. And if my short happens, then my Felden's Cane will happen. I'm just gonna play sequentially.
Well, that's actually kind of interesting because then you are just playing. I mean, I don't know. You can have short in brain freeze, but
so like the way that I'm thinking about this is Stasis. I mean, people by default are like Stasis is like maybe like a control lock or a combo lock deck, right? But I
it's
think
just stasis. Like it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be grouped. My entire thesis about the deck is that it just like literally doesn't function the same as other decks.
I think that it's like the beatdown, right? So the way that I look at it, and like games that I have, not just the games that I lost, but the games that I've seen people lose, is the problem is they get into a situation of geometric damage where they're like go from 0 damage to all of a sudden they're taking 6 and 9 damage a turn, which means that the Stasis deck doesn't have to lock them. It doesn't have to control. It just has to maintain the status quo for a very limited amount of time once it's doing this much damage. But when you shift your perspective into I'm going to be a mana short Felden's Cane deck, I'm a 2-card combo deck now. I'm Splinter Twin. Like all I had to do is mana short you, and then these cards will resolve, and you're boned, right? Like, and there's no getting out of it because I had mana short. And so like. The only question is like, what is the most effective strategy against mana short is a more interesting question than any of these other questions. Because it seems to me mana short is a better strategy than all of these other things. And it also allows you to maintain your plan A. And like, instead of like, I'm going to go into these, the whole point of going away from your plan A, siding out your rebels, right? Here's the switcheroo. I used to be a creatureless deck. Now I'm a creature deck. Is because you're playing opportunistically against an opponent who has insufficient information. So you're banking on them making a mistake strategically. That's the whole point of those. If everybody has full information, none of these strategies.
It doesn't have to be black and white. So like, for example, if you
semi-transform.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a simple thing, right? A very obvious point of this is just like, I'm playing Replenish and I'm boarding Exalted Angels. That's exploitative because you know that your opponent is going to board out Swords of Plowshares. Similarly, if your Dreadnought deck boards out all the Dreadnoughts and boards in Brain Freeze, you're playing opportunistically against opponents who are going to bring in a null. So there is kind of weird blends.
Well,
which
you
is just
typically take out some Dreadnoughts, but not all of them in that situation, right? Like
in that situation, you're still turning on a null, right? And then obviously a null is always on because you need Powder Keg, but in the situation that you are playing, for instance, the Dreadnought Mirror, and you just decide that you're going to have null and null targets in your deck, then that can be an opportunistic thing, which then gets next leveled because then your opponent's going to play Misdirection and pitch their nulls to Misdirections, which is like the Raska plan. But aside from that, like I just want to emphasize that like in the Replenish example, it's not black and white. It's opportunistic. But even if your opponent is like licking their lips and they're like, ha ha ha, like I've got you now. I know that you're boarding in Exalted Angel, so I'm just going to keep 4 Swords to Plowshares in my deck against your Replenish deck, and then you just might like live in the universe where you like replenish them and they have Swords to Plowshares in their hand, and you can just attunement your angels away.
So I think this is an Iron Man versus Hulk situation, actually. Like all of these like novel sideboard strategies are a way to be Iron Man. We're like, look at how clever I am, right? But the thing that I said was just like, actually, here's She-Hulk, here's Red Hulk. We have more Hulks, and you can't outsmart our original Green Hulk because your strategy loses to my other Hulk.
Yeah.
And then my original Hulk is going to puny god you over Avengers Tower.
Yeah. This is the same. Mike Packer is notably not a fan of Exalted Angel in the Replenish sideboard. He's just like, I can have 15 cards that make it more likely that I, cast and resolve Replenish or my enchantments or whatever. So I'm just going to do that. And I think that it is totally okay with me. Like I'm fundamentally fine if your idea for Stasis is to have Stasis in your deck and always reinforce Stasis after sideboarding. Same as Andy playing his Tide deck and not boarding out Parallax Tide even against fast decks. Just being like having Tide in his deck.
There because when he did it originally,
it didn't work.
He couldn't. The problem is his deck takes so long to actually win the game that the opponent, if they're not constrained on resources, can just not lose.
Right. Exactly. And so these things are important to kind of get into, and I'm fine if you decide in your journey to perfect the Stasis list and you dedicate your entire sideboarding to maximizing the quality of Stasis rather than transforming the nature of your deck. Like I'm totally fine with that. I don't know. That's what makes it complicated. It's like I don't actually know which path creates more equity. I think that you're making a good argument for it, that you can just like have it, mostly because the cards you board in can hit a larger portion of the metagame, right? So you're, one of the things is like you can't board in Brain Freeze as effectively against in Stasis against a deck like Black-White Control. I mean, especially just because they'll just duress your Brain Freeze. But so there's like there'll be questions like that where mana short is of course totally reasonable against Black-White Control. I do think that you fall prey if the only way for you to win a game is Black Vice and Felden's Cane. One, if your way to win a game is Felden's Cane, then you're just going to unintentionally draw a lot. And unfortunately,
what if I won game one? I mean, that's the situation I'm probably in if there's Felden's Cane in my deck.
I mean, you just can't count on it. Like, so what if your opponent...
If there's Felden's Cane in my deck, I think it's likely that I won game one. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I disagree with the premise that you win game one 100% of the time that you have Felden's Cane in your deck, but that's neither here nor there. All I'm saying is that Felden's Cane is a shaky at best win condition in every universe. In every universe where you plausibly can lose game one.
We don't have Mono Fable
splits game 1 and 2 and then go to game 3, which if Felden's Cane is your win con in game 3, then it's not a win con, it's a draw con. So there's that. And again, if you want to hear more Stasis, you can tune into I got questions. They did a state of the deck on Stasis.
What if I have Soul Devi Digger?
You can do whatever you want. It's a free
Soul
country.
Devi Digger, and I only bring back the Gushes.
But yeah, there's like 4 Stasis pilots. They talk through the deck. There's some interesting stuff hashed out. They talk a little bit about Pyroclasm. They talk about Stifle, which I disagree with. I don't really like Stifle. They talk about Daze. I think it's fine to cut Daze. Most players are not playing Arcane Denial, although if you hit TC decks, I guess some players are playing lots of Arcane Denial.
I've only ever played against Arcane Denial.
Yeah, that's...
Like last 3 times I played.
Okay, so in conclusion... There's a lot of freedom to tinker with this Stasis deck. I kind of thought, so this was my world, right? Chris Roy wins Massachusetts Monthly with Stasis. He has Morphling in his deck, which was a little insane. And his 2 win cons main deck are Morphling and Stroke of Genius. He plays Propaganda, but the most important idea of his deck was not playing these situational cards, just being a good blue control deck. He played 24 lands. He played 1 Forsaken City. And his plan was to do it the old-fashioned way, just like play islands, play lots of thwarts, play lots of counter spells, and like not even bother with Black Vice. I thought that was really good. I took it for a spin. The deck felt good, except for Morphling, which felt a little insane. But the rest of it was fine.
His primary way to win game 1 is just attacking for 3 in the air.
His primary way to win game 1 is probably Stroke of Genius, and I found that the deck was like pretty good at just playing 40 turns. Like it was just like a good at doing 40 turns Stroke of Genius, which at that point your win con can be anything, and it's just good to have. I would have Black Vice instead of Morphling. The important part is that you want a mix of win conditions that are resilient to duress. And resilient to disenchant. So,
do you need 4 propaganda? I feel like
no, you don't need 4 propaganda. You can do whatever you want. Like I think Chris Roy in future lists stopped playing 4 propaganda, and he had the second Forsaken City, and I'm pretty on board for that. But I'm still explaining our world. So I played this list, and I was like, damn, this feels pretty good. This actually feels like a powerful deck, and if I didn't have to play with like the Magic Online clock as much, like I would explore this further. But instead, it was kind of killing me to operate the deck. So I figured that some of these advancements would take hold, but if you just browse all the Stasis lists, it's just like there's literally anything can be in the deck. Ricky Thorson's version that has access to Pyroclasm, I think, is like pretty cool and interesting too. That's like another pilot that's successful with it. But this 1 hour and 20 minutes in.
You got to be more than 1 Forsaken City if you're going to be the pirate.
Yeah. I would obviously play Forsaken City if I'm going to splash red. But this brings me to you can play Lairs. Lairs are awesome. Lairs work under Stasis, so it's like super good. But this brings me to I think the first most relevant take, because I wanted to have hot takes. And the first take I wanted to talk about, because this is calling out exactly what Jay just said, which is just like I gravitate towards prominent results. So Ricky was having results. Hurst actually doesn't play in too many tournaments anymore, so I just haven't been out in the street. Either that or he's not winning them. But regardless, Thorson had the result, Thursday's God, and Chris Roy had the result. And Chris Tolar said, my hot take is that there's a consistently disproportionate overvaluation or undervaluation of a given deck in relation to whether big names are winning events with those decks. Basically calling me straight out when I'm just like, well, looks like X person won with this deck. This is the super great deck, et cetera, et cetera. This is a blind sport perpetrated by both prominent community voices and the community at large, and allows a metagame to be taken by surprise by savvy players who are willing to put the time into assessing the perceived metagame and then exploiting it. So there's basically two takes here, which is one, we overreact to big name results with decks, and two, you can if you can do your homework and win a Magic tournament. He provides the example of Sam Black Enchantress and Fran Black-White Control. Agree or disagree, Michael J. Flores?
Okay. Number one, I think you do that. That is correct. I don't do that. Number two, I agree with. You
do the opposite. You do. This guy won 3 rounds at Meetup last week, and this is the new metagame. And you also won't shut up about Devourer.
Right. So but I don't. You do the first one for sure. I don't do that. And like you have this weird appeal to authority for people who like went 4-1 or 5-0 in an MTGO league. Like, who cares? Like, that's actually
changed. So the MTGO leagues are the most rigorous, adjacent to Swiss data that we have, short of Swiss data, because now you play 6 rounds and then you actually play an elimination. So when I say
I'll just give you an example where you're just like, well, Phil Bunch of Numbers says this, and I'm like, he's definitely wrong, and you're like, he did this, and that's his deck, and I'm like, he's just not right. Like, none of this makes any sense. And then like the second it actually happens in a big tournament, it's like, wow, none of these things made any sense. Like, they didn't make any sense. He was just beating people who weren't as good as him. Like, that's I agree with Chris's first.
Okay, so let me break that down. Let me break that down really quickly. The only way for your theory to be true in this regard is if you also played Black Green Survival and then you did better than average with Black Green Survival.
I mean,
right?
I did better than average in the 5 rounds I played.
So like if my point is that Phil Bunch of Numbers is playing the Black Green Survival deck correctly, it does not disprove my point that Black Green Survival didn't do well or Phil didn't do well at Lobstercon. All it says is that Black Green Survival is not as good as the deck we thought it was. It is purely speculative that you adopting the Michael J. Flores strategy of Black Green Survival would yield you any better results than Phil Bunch Numbers. And if you ask me, hey, Lanny, I'm interested in this Black Green Survival deck. Who should I listen to? The guy who's played like 300 matches of it, or Michael J, who just has an idea and has played like 10 matches of it? I would be like, I would probably listen to Phil Bunch of Numbers. Like, I think that Michael J is like a pretty smart guy, and I think that he's got some interesting ideas, and you're welcome to listen to them. But like, the appeal to authority here is like reasonable. Like, if it was me, I'd be like, oh yeah, well, this guy's got like a 3,000 word sideboard guide, and he's kind of like figured it out. Like, I would need to play it and figure out if I deviate. All you're saying is just that you've played it and you've deviated, which is fine. Like, that's totally fine to like start with somebody else's work and just be like, okay, well, I think that's less than accurate. But it's not proof that they're inaccurate.
I'm just citing the phenomenon, right? I'm agreeing with Tolar on the front end, right? And I'm amplifying this by saying like, well, here, like, just like, well, Thursday did this or so and so did this, and I'm like, all right, sometimes they're right and sometimes they're not, same as everybody else, right? Like, I think that's different from Selden winning back-to-back Lobstercons. Like, that's different. Okay, Selden's Landstill deck that he won Lobstercon with was very meaningful in its evolution of Landstill technology. Right, clearly his deck that he played last year was very influenced. We continue to be influenced by the deck that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those two are different animals. One, like, that Landstill list then went on to just like not make a dent in the metagame, and then
also, to be fair, there was also a prominent change in the
that's
the
fine.
Availability of cards after that. Right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
But anyway, and Tolar's right in the second case for sure. And he's a good example of somebody. You know, a year ago, you and I were like, why would you play Mary's Guile? What an idiot. Mirror's Guile is so stupid. Now, even Rich Shea has got 4 Mirror's Guile.
Yeah, no, I mean, he said it himself.
Rich Shea, the Enchantress King of, well, I'm going to play Sylvan Library, and then I'm going to do whatever kind of words combos can exploit.
Let's not forget Abundance.
Right? Like, Rich Shea is now in the 4 Mirror's Guile camp with the deck that he won Lobstercon with. So clearly Tolar has got something going on in point 2. I think that point 1, I give him 0.75 on that one. 0.2 full points. So I was like a 1.75 out of 2.
Right.
I would.
Well, I'll address the two things separately. One is that I actually think that there is the big name effect, which I absolutely see with all of Fran's content, because oftentimes people will play exactly the 75 that Fran is playing. But the other thing that happens is that they will top 8 the tournament with that carbon copy 75. So it kind of, yes, Fran has outsized influence, but if you're going to be like, once again, this is a 75, it's not attached to any name or YouTube video, and this is just like somebody who got, whatever, 4th place in a 120-person league, and this is Fran, and it has a video of him playing it and talking about why he put all the cards in the deck, and like whatever, like what deck do you think that you should choose?
I have met. First of all, I love Fran. He's like a Magic the Gathering brother to me. I don't want this to be anything negative around Fran when I say this, but like it's the same as before there was MTGA, right? Like Jerry Thompson or Patrick Chapin or myself would put an article out on Star City Premium, and then that would be a deck that would immediately top 8 the Open that weekend, and then never be seen again, right? Like that happened all the time. Right. So they put me on Fridays so that people would buy subscriptions because they were going to play those decks over the weekend. Right. That's the origin of Flores Fridays. And that like Premodern is sort of the situation where it's not MTGA. MTGA is like a bazillion monkeys on typewriters, right? Like
okay. So I get what you're saying. Do you think that people are wrong to take the advice of a perceived expert?
I think that
if they're going to attack,
wrong is the wrong word. So the thing is, like, if I have a novel take, okay, I have a novel, whatever that novel take is, right? I have a novel take that is fundamentally different from how other people play, and other people do one of two things. They misidentify the thing across the table from them because they don't understand my novel take, right? Or I play cards that are like, that fundamentally change the character of a matchup because this is not exactly the animal that
if you have mana short,
then what ends up happening is you get that translates into free game wins, right? So the easiest example would be like I play like a non-basic land, a survival of the fittest, a wall of blossoms or whatever. I'm like, oh, look at all my non-basic lands. I'm like, oh, am I playing against Hermit Feb? Like, if you're against you or Fran's like Illuminati decks, this could be like your weird triple meddling mage deck. It could also be a Lurin. If I'm like in my head, I'm like, I just have to focus on the Hermit Druid. Man, I'm just gonna keep him from unearthing here, right? I'm gonna lose if that it's like all of my sentries are aimed to the west, right? And then like people are gonna come over my wall in the east. Like you're asking for it if that's the case. But that is a result of a novel take that looks like something else and an imbalance of information at the same time. That's not something being better, right? Like that's I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, your example was horrible, but I know what you're trying to say, which is that plausibly mine or Fran's non-basic land survival deck looked like Hermit Feb, a deck that you can't even play online for some amount of turns, even though my deck has a Bant mana base, 7 fetches, and 8 basics, and sure, it has survival of fittest, survival of fittest, and wall. You said Wall of Blossoms, which is not contained in the Hermit Fed deck. So let's use a different example and say that plausibly Fran's black-white control deck got some points matchups because it looked.
I think that's a bad. First of all, I have thoughts about that deck, but I think it's a bad example because this deck doesn't do anything.
Right. That's a novel take.
Okay. Like, I'm just like a slower.
So like I could deck, so right? So like plausibly my Grotog deck sometimes starts with Island Portent Opt, and then people think I'm playing Dreadnought, so then they'll Meddling Mage naming Dreadnought.
Meddling Maging Dreadnought is a pretty common thing, I think, like where it looks like Dreadnought.
This is all very, very distant from the question of whether content creators, influencers create the problem.
They clearly influence.
Yes, they do. So this is my question. This is what I want to dig into, right? So first of all, I want to address a couple of things, which is one that Sam Black's Enchantress did not get a lot of attention. Sam Black was like, nobody plays my deck. That's kind of weird. Like, he's like, I'm used to having more influence than this, and people don't actually.
The second half of his statement is, I will continue to win tournaments.
Yeah, he's like, okay, I guess I'm going to keep winning. But the thing that I want to ask you, which I think is the interesting thing about this phenomenon, which is, if you are less like, I'm just going to cut to the point, right? Chris is saying that you should do the work. And I think that that's correct. I think that any Spike Colony listener, any YouTube consumer, any person that is engaged with the pre-modern format should experience the joy of doing the work. And you can use content as a jumping off point. You can use net decking as a jumping off point, but you should do exactly what Fran does sometimes, or all the time with Fran's case, what I do sometimes, and whenever Mike isn't net decking, he does sometimes by changing a few cards, like changing a few cards in the 75, like changing up the deck, having a hypothesis about what's going to happen when you change certain cards. I encourage everyone to do that. And I think what Chris is actually pointing out is simply the fact that there is limited time to approaching the pre-modern format. Not everybody plays as much pre-modern as I do, or Fran did before he went on hiatus, or Rich does, or Will Hurst does with Stasis, or Ricky Thorson does with Stasis, or even what like some random import from another format, right? So this isn't just big names. Sometimes it'll be somebody who could just be like Josh Kusinskis, who top forward Lobstercon, and his take on Blue-White Tide wasn't building Blue-White Tide. It was just like taking the mono blue Tide deck and adding white to it, which led him to a bunch of.
I feel like that version predated the mono blue Tide.
It did. So Blue-White Tide predate, but the point is that Joshua's process was, at the time, mono blue was the more popular deck, right? So just as when Fran invented Blue-White Stifle Knot, he wasn't the first person to play a white splash and a Stifle Knot deck.
Took out the cards that people were playing white for.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting. It's like they had enlightened tutors to increase the frequency.
Exactly. So, but this
cut all that.
The point is the process is that you're saying he cut all that.
I actually want to respond, because I'm going to forget all of the things, because you've said so much stuff. I want to relate this back to conversations I had with Patrick Chapin, who's a longtime collaborator of mine in a bunch of different contexts. There's 2 points that I think that are salient. One of them is macro, a point that we like a key phrase we would say to each other, because both of us are brewers and we have all kinds of ideas. And so, and that's gun to your head. So it's like, gun to your head, what deck do you play? Right? Like,
Grotog.
Is it right? Like, if that's, you could come up with that answer so fast, right? Like, gun to your head, whether it's like, well, my triple Meddling Mage survival deck is so interesting. I'm like, well, if you cut these cards and only emphasize these Vindicates, blah, 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 you have such an interesting blah, blah, blah. I'm like, nah, man, gun to your head. What deck do you play? Right? That's one, right? So I think that's one of the things you have to do with content creators, where being influenced or whatever, and what the stakes are. There's a lot of questions. The second thing is, I try not to use should. I actively try not to use the word should in any language anymore, even in personal interactions with people. And I just relate it back to a thing that I used to have this dispute with Patrick, because I was just like, I think coming from where you're coming from, which is like, you can optimize all of these processes, right? You could learn how to sideboard better. You could learn how to play this particular interaction better. And he would always come back and like, people have finite time. Like, the reason that net decking is popular is because people don't have the time to have all of these experiences, but they do want to have the experience of playing, right? And so when it comes back to me, I would say, do a little brewing now, but the experience that I like to have is, hopefully I like to play, right? I like to play pre-modern, and I like to think about pre-modern. I like to talk about the things that I think about. But the thing that I put my stamp on it is like I like collecting cards and putting beautiful versions or meme versions together, and I like having a lot of different experiences, which is the opposite of Sam. Sam's like, oh, it's weird to me that you want to play a different deck all the time. I'm like, well, that's the whole point, right? I want to have a bunch of different experiences, and I put my stamp on it by having this printing, and then I move on to a different deck next week. And that is different than Tolar's experience. Tolar has put 600 matches of Enchantress in the, he's playing hundreds and hundreds of matches of Enchantress. Of course he's a master of it, right? I haven't put that many matches of any of these decks. I mean, I probably put that many matches in Standard, but this isn't the Standard podcast, right? So, like,
Ew.
that's what?
Ew.
I really have, right?
Yeah, this is neither the Standard podcast nor the Deck Pick podcast, but you can head over to Instagram.com/5withflores to view all of Mike's beautiful deck picks. The thing that you're saying about the gun to your head and finite time, I think is absolutely right. But the problem is we can't just make a YouTube video every week and just be play Phyrexian Dreadnought. No,
but like
there's a gun to your head. You should play Dreadnought.
You're just like, oh, like people should put in the work. I mean, like people have different objectives. If my objective is to try to win the event, right? Like, so I kind of have this asterisk now where like winning the event is secondary to me, maybe tertiary to me.
Ew.
So I just want to like hang out with my friends. It's weird to me.
I think winning the event lowered in your priority once you stopped winning events. Like, I think that this is like
I used to really care. The thing is, like, I look back, like the first interaction I had with Bill Ellis, I was just like kind of a dick because I didn't win the event, and I was just like, I don't need to be a dick.
Oh, right? Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And like I used to care so much about winning, and like I look around and just like SWB and Andy, yourself, Bill, like these are like Cam. Lan, like these are just people I want to hang out with, right? Like, and I like literally just got an invite to go to Andy's house tomorrow.
Let's save woke.
I would rather
let's save woke kumbaya, Mike. Like for after closing the loop. Like, let's talk about net decking, which is just that. Anyway, like, yes.
But the secondary thing is one of the things that's attractive to me about the format is I get to play all these cards that either I haven't played in decades or I own most of them, and I get to just have a wide span of experiences, and it's fun, right? Like, but if I got to go to Lobstercon this year, I would have approached it differently, Lanny.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, like, that's understandable.
Right? Like, but I tried to win Grand Prix Levine.
I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I'm actually aligned with you, which is just basically saying the reason why content is successful at all is because it is both. It can be multiple things to multiple people, right? So you can engage with pre-modern similarly to Mike. You can just be like, oh, let's just play Rich's deck and let's do it while hanging out with my friends and, having a good time. And also, like, I own all these cards and maybe I want to get nicer versions or worse versions of specific cards. And that can be your process. And as a result of people doing that, Rich's deck is going to get played more. So Chris is saying like, oh, well, if somebody wins a tournament with this deck and everybody starts paying attention, it's just like, yeah, like I'm not going to pick the person who got 10th place. Like if I'm going to like, I'm like, who was also playing the same Enchantress list, whatever. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like if you're you and you're not a content creator in this situation and you're just a content consumer, it makes sense that you would fire up YouTube and just be like, okay, I don't have time to play any matches right now, but let's watch Fran play some matches. Let's watch him play this black-white control deck. Like, oh, this has some cards that I own, that I like, that I'm interested in. And this creates the ripple effect, which results in supposedly this landscape of net deckers.
I will go through a process for you that I actually went through this week. You'll be half proud of me, and then you'll be flabbergasted at the end of this story. I have been brewing myself for Sacred Torch, and I have not been collaborating with anyone because all the people I would collaborate with are the enemy. Okay? So I'm like, I made a pretty good deck. I actually was bouncing it off Detail last
Proud of you.
Okay? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have all the angles covered, right? And I'm like, I think people are going to make assumptions based on this, and this, and I think I have a good edge.
Quick question. Aren't you just going to wait until I ask to borrow certain cards and then just choose a deck that defeats what I'm borrowing?
Well, no, I actually have been working on. I have like 3 or 4 different decks I've been working on for Sacred Torch by myself, right? So that's one. But then here's the secondary thing. Last week, like 2 or 3 really good players like Cam and SWB showed up with Hoth. And I was in the shower today, and I'm like, okay, Land's going to play Hoth probably. I'm like, these guys all seem to like Hoth, and I'm like, I don't think I could beat Hoth. And I'm like, I can't take this into a room where like plausibly 3 players are on Hoth and maybe 4 players on Hoth, all of whom are $1,000 winner champions, right? Like, it's like my deck idea is pretty good, and I'm like, what are my chances against OSIP? I know what he's playing, right? I'm like, but if Land, Cam, and SWB are all on a Hoth, I'm like, this is a bad idea. Like, this is a great idea going into Lobstercon, right? Because Lobstercon's like 100-something people, 200 people. I'm like, and I only need to beat 5 people in this room out of like the 40 or whatever that are registered. But they're all going to be on a deck that I can't beat. So like that's my roller coaster on this. I'm like, shit. Like, so I'm already got to move on to the next idea because like it was an Iron Man idea, right? I'm like, okay, here are my angles I'm covering.
All ideas are for what it's worth. Like, so it's much more difficult to come up with a superpower.
So I'm like, oh man, I have such a good this. I was going to maybe ask Rich. I think would have a really good POV on this. And then I'm like, I was like running through Matt. I'm like, I can't even formulate a plan where I could beat Hoth. Like that's how bad it is, right? The problem is my deck isn't fast, right? My deck is a sledgehammer if my opponent plays into it.
This is actually very strange to me because I think if you told me that you could play a deck and the only 2 to 3 people you'd be worried about are Land, Cam, and SWB, I would ship it because SWB probably ends up playing something different. He likes to change decks pretty often. So I would give him, just because I saw him playing it once, I would not like put him on likely. God,
I did the sideboard mapping already.
Cam is a 30% split between Hoth, Enchantress, and Elves, and I would expect that he would play something like Enchantress, knowing that the deck is really good now. And then Lan, I would put at above 75% to play Hoth.
But he won 1Ks last year with Hoth and Replenish,
but only if he's lazy about it. And so like at that point, you're only dodging 50% of SLBB and Cam, and then 25%.
I'm sure they have a mini Illuminati that doesn't include me, right? Like that's a thing, right? Like,
well, then maybe
right now,
maybe your best bet is to show them that different look. Anyways, I'm proud of you for all this. I can't wait to see what you bring.
Yeah, we end up with elves.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Elves is I guess a good deck now. I'll play goblins then. I don't mind my goblins versus most things matchup.
Goblins is so uninspiring. I mean, I went 1 and 2 in the league 2 weeks ago with it. It's just so uninspiring.
It definitely has that element to it, but yeah, content creators, what we do, making deck lists that get ripped off and then become popular. I think that's one thing. The other thing is gigantic hot take monolithic statements that everybody seems to believe after content creators saying it. That's the elephant in the room that I think needs addressing.
Like Red is dead?
Like Red is dead. Like
I'm actually going to write an article this week called like, who said Red is dead?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Like, what kind of idiot would have said that?
Unbelievable. Terrageddon sucks. Black green survival sucks. Elves sucks. We did say Red is dead. What else did we say?
Survival, I think, might suck.
I don't think that we've ever said that Enchantress like really sucks, but
we never put it on that. We never gave it any respect.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely never said something along the lines of like, oh, it's on the up and up. Like most of my experience with that deck is just kind of like you draw your opening hand and it doesn't have Enchantress in it, and then you mulligan, and then your next 6 doesn't have Enchantress in it, and you mulligan again, and your next like 5 is like, okay, well, there's a Sterling Grove here, so I'll have an Enchantress Presence in play on turn 4, and then and then you like work towards your Enchantress Presence in play on turn 4, and then your opponent counters or disenchants it, and then you lose the game. Or I'm just like playing Grotog and I'm watching my opponent doing all these things, and I'm like, cool, Meddling Mage naming anything. It doesn't like Enchantress people have been like popping off. They're like, people are so bad at naming meddling mage. Like I don't know how bad they are. I don't know what they're naming.
Name a card, man.
But you could just name a card that they could have in their hand, and then you can counter the other card, and you'll be fine.
If it's turn 2 and you're on the play, you name Argothian.
I think you can.
Like,
but hey, if you have engineered plague in your hand, you don't have to name Argothian. Like, that's the beauty of meddling mage.
I think like if it's deeper in the game, you just name Parallax Tide, and the number of cards that you have to deal. Parallax Wave, sorry, and the number of cards you have to deal is actually pretty small.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? The new Enchantress deck could give a different look to Grotog, and I'm excited for it. But I think I need to respond to this idea that we are like promoting propaganda and that our listeners are like sheeple that have no free thought and just spout what we say.
I mean,
without
clearly nobody cares because whether they call it out or not, like we're like declared red dead, and there were like 2 Goblins decks in the top 8 of the Massachusetts tournament that weekend, including the winner, who was on a completely different angle of Goblins that had been seen in Premodern, right? Like,
I mean, red's kind of dead. Like, it didn't. No red top 8'd Lobstercon. Like, it top 8'd. It rocked the vanilla side event, but
yeah. But I think also like it wasn't obviously like burn decks have been the most popular deck at Lobstercon for 3 years running, and they clearly weren't this year, right? Like, so like
they were second most popular.
The population is down.
That's true. I mean, it's almost wild that all of the mountains in the top 8 were contained by elf decks. And there, of course, were no basic swamps.
Speaking of elf decks, did you see the deck that came in second at the Star City event? Which is, I was talking about this. I was talking about this to you. I'm like, Mike, I think we should try playing poachers and
Mike, you got to keep up with the Spy Colony podcast. I played against Manny Moutinho at Lobstercon, and I haven't shut up about Trinity Green since then. And yes, we did say that we should play Rafellos Plow Under in our like elves
but also
deck.
Poachers and Cradles. Like that's the thing I was talking about. I don't remember what night it was.
Cradles.
I'm totally on this.
Cradles makes a lot of sense. I'm on board with you there. Yes, Manny has been crushing it with Trinity Green. I think if you listen to some amount of the talk that has been around, but this is basically a survival-less elves deck that has Tanglewire, it has Winter Orb type stuff, it has Rishadan Port, it has no mountain, no anger, obviously it doesn't have survival, and it's just all about poaching up Deranged Hermits. 4 Poacher, 4 Deranged Hermit, and hit send. No Rafellos here, but
I was thinking about starting with Ramosian Sergeant. So Ramosian Sergeant can Ramosian Sergeant into Poacher with Gaia's Cradle. Come on, man.
So you have to get the Falcon, then you have to get Civi, then you can get Poacher.
It's just a different line.
Which happens to be a rebel.
Copy of each of those cards.
So you have one. So you splash white.
Yeah.
You have Sergeant for Falcon, for Civi, for Poacher, one of each.
Yeah.
How do you cast your Civi? You have to have so many white sources.
You could have white sources. This is obviously not a Rafellos deck, right? It's just a different line. You play 4 Sergeants.
Okay. You could just put Survival of the Fittest back into your deck. And then instead of playing Ramosian Sergeant, you have Survival of the Fittest.
Well, it's different because like against Dreadnought, or Sergeant is unbeatable.
Okay, so this is a mostly white deck that splashes green for Poacher and Hermits.
And Gaia's Cradle.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to see
the Gaia's Cradle is actually what makes the deck.
Gaia's Cradle is really good with Rebels. Yeah. I'm in with that. Gaia's Cradle should have been in these Goblin decks. The night before side event, Hoyp was just like, I want to swap an Ancient Tomb for Gaia's Cradle, and he didn't go through with it, but I thought it was.
You get so much action if you go this direction. You get Waxwain if you want it. You get getting Sword Supplishers is a big deal. But like, I think you're just like a lock against Dreadnought. That's the reason why I think it's interesting.
All right, don't say too much, or else you're going to be spoiling it for your competition at the Sacred Torch Showdown. I don't know. The monolithic Spy Colony hot take propaganda machine does not take itself that seriously, and also I think it is important to have takes rather than to not have takes, because not having takes is super boring. It's not content. And like, takes can be revised and it's not a big deal. I also would like to add that if it ever occurs to you to say something along the lines of like blank certain popular podcasters or certain voices or like whatever have been pushing this and like whatever, you can just say my name. You are allowed to say my name directly, and I will respond to you directly, and I will probably say something along the lines of you're right, or I do have to revise my reports of saying
or shut up, fucking die.
Yeah. So one of the three. But like you can call me by my name, and I can absolutely chime in. I can say like, yeah, I underrated Enchantress. I mean, I think to be fair, I'd never seen a build with 4 exploration and the 6-pack of.
I feel like that's the default build, and people had gone away from it.
That was the default build.
I made.
Well, so the
2 years ago, 3 years ago,
right? But the all the things never happened at the same time, right? So sometimes there was exploration and no Miri's Guile. It was like exploration and elephant grass.
Right? I would have never gotten to Miri's Guile.
Yeah,
right? That's by myself.
Sometimes there was Sacred Mesa or mobilization or Decree of Justice, right? And there was exploration or there's no exploration. Like there's been so many looks for the deck, but like this look that has specifically Opal Wave, which actually kind of feels like it hits you over the head of like, of course, that's the best way to go.
It was on Opal Wave 2 years ago, for sure.
Right.
But he didn't have those other cards.
Right. But 3 copies of each is pretty important because like when you have
he didn't have any Miri Skiles, right? So if you're talking about like all the things,
right. It's a confluence.
But I also think this is like an opportunistic deck. Like if everybody knows the list, I think that it probably gets a lot weaker.
I think it's just an opportunistic deck, period. Like I think that if Elves and Replenish are going to be more popular, this deck is going to struggle more. Like, and the Elves list.
It's also just one of those situations where if he just doesn't play the Portent, right? Like you just counterspell all the conditions.
So
like that's
it's a little bit complex because so what we're talking about was Justin in the finals not stockpiling the 4th mana to cast the 4th counterspell in a single turn against Rich's turn where he casts all 4 of his win conditions in the same turn. Our take on that is pretty simple, which is like, yes, I agree that it turns out that the Portent, which is catnip to blue players apparently, shouldn't have been cast. You cast all 4 counterspells. So then the discussion becomes, do you think that Justin is going to win games 2 and 3 against all the Plowshares, Xanad Swarm, and Carpet of Flowers that Rich is bringing? And my answer to that question is that do not sideboard anything, and you mulligan to the nuts. And
you just try to plan A them.
20% twice, right? Like 20% of the time, I'm rolling 20% twice. Run it twice, dealer. I'm gonna try to get Dreadnought, Gush, double foil into my hand with combo, and ship it on turn 2 or 3.
I'll tell you what I'm on right now, because whatever, Sacred Torch isn't for 2 months, right? But I actually was going to work on Stasis with Mana Short in the sideboard and an Upheaval in the sideboard, and I was fine the Upheaval, and then none of these idiot. Here's my I'm just going to counterspell the Replenish in there, and their Parallax Wave, and if they don't have Xanad Swarm, it kind of just doesn't even matter because they can't beat Upheaval. Right, so my strategy is just Upheaval Vice. And then
you just said Upheaval wasn't that good.
Not in the main deck. Okay. I'm talking specifically against Enchantress.
Why not just have it in the main deck if some percentage of decks are going to get rocked by Upheaval in game 1?
I guess it's also pretty good if I just like mana short people and then Upheaval them because I kind of want to play Thawing Glaciers.
Okay, yeah, right? Sure.
So like. I mean, like, that's a matchup where, like, I'm against Stasis for sake of argument. I'm sorry, I'm against Enchantress for the sake of argument. I'm like, I side out, like, most or all of my Stasises. Maybe I'll leave 1 Stasis, right? And I just play, like, Thawing Glaciers 9 mana, like, 1 turn kill you. Like, that's my entire game plan with Powder Kegs.
Right.
Like, that's a real game plan, right? And then I guess you can borrow a lot of that for the Dreadnought matchups. And then I'm like... propaganda chill against the red aggro decks, but the problem is this deck is probably gonna have like a 0% win rate against Elves, or maybe you just live with
all of the Stasis decks have 0% against Elves except for the red splash. I mean, I don't know if you're gonna play.
That's what my current thought is. But I still am nursing my other idea, but I'm just like I can't. Because obviously this deck would be great against Hoth.
Yeah.
Like,
I think that Stasis is underrated. I actually pitched Stasis to you the week before Lobstercon. I was like, "What about Stasis?" And
this is literally my A deck.
Make a shrug. Yeah.
with the tech that I just told.
And now you're about it. I mean, I think Stasis
2 months
is
from
really
now,
good.
maybe I won't. Maybe I'll like lose interest or whatever.
I mean, it's hard
Right?
not to like Stasis because you get to do all of the things that make Dreadnought good, and then you get to like not be doing Dreadnought, which is exploitative of the current
reason that
environment.
I like it is if you just do an index of the free wins, like think about all the good players. The good players love cards like Sylvan Library and Gush. And if I go first and I just play a Black Vice, it restricts their ability to play. People are like so hung up on whether or not you can get under the Black Vice and don't think enough about how much you have to do to get under the Black Vice. What kind of likelihood do you think you have of winning a counterspell war with me in the mid game if you have 4 cards and I have 7?
Right. So are you just gonna play 4 Vice in your deck?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So like I'm interested in the Chris Roy deck. That is interesting things. Like maybe I'll play 2 Propaganda or whatever. But like the amount of value you get from playing 4 Black Vice against the players who I care about beating is enormous. And I'm just going to be like 4 chills after sideboarding, 100%. Right. Like I played red deck against Stasis recently, and I was utterly paralyzed by a multiple chill game. Right. Like just can't do anything. And then. I'm like pecking them away for 1 or 2, and then they just kill me with Black Vice literally faster than my red deck can kill them because there's 2 chills in play.
All right. Well, importantly, make sure that you post that deck pic so that people can sweet net deck that after listening to the Spy Colony podcast. Jumping into the next take, Rich Shea says the elimination round should be played on a separate day, and we might need a larger venue if possible. Agree or disagree?
I disagree.
You disagree on having you weren't there and you didn't top 8. You didn't top 1.
I mean, I've played top 8s on long days before, including at Lobstercon.
Yeah, I mean, this was like straight up. This was like 11 to 11, so it was probably hour 12 for Rich.
First of all, like
hour 13 for Rich.
Asking people to pay 3 days of rent instead of 2 days of rent is like 50% more for the tournament.
Well, let's assume that wouldn't happen. Because you would just like do a day 1 on Friday, and then you would play the second half of day 1, like second half.
I think there's a lot of reasons not to. The second thing is just like I've been in situations where like they have the Star City event in Secaucus or something. I go out and then like I literally have to get up, go back to Secaucus at like 7 a.m. the next day to play the top 8, and I might lose. Right, like that sucks. Right, like. Having to go back to the venue in another state at 7 a.m. on the second day and then going 0-1 is about the worst utilization.
How many people do you think are commuting multiple hours to play at LobsterCon?
I've been in this situation.
I'm just saying, how many people do you think this affects? Because the majority of the people that I know are either local to Boston or got Airbnbs. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, logistically, there's that. And then the other thing is just, man, I want it to be at the end of the day. I want it to be the crowning achievement. I want it to be the good players who are not playing anymore, like yourself, like me last year. We're in the booth that day because we are already on site and have things to say about our friends who are still battling it out. I feel like, not that I'm so sentimental, but that's just how Magic tournaments are.
Yeah. I like this. Yeah, this is a minority point of view. Most people are kind of angling for like, we need to figure out a way to make this tournament not 14 hours. But I like this. I like this.
Used to be part of who gets to qualify. I mean, part of who gets to win or gets a big top 8 or whatever is who is the most resilient over the course of time. And I don't mind that. And we're all old men now, right? I love
except for Joshua Kuchinskis.
Except for Kuchinskis or
18 years old. Yeah.
These guys have like a little bit of an edge against us. But like,
also shout out to Kuchinskis. I talked to him in person. I checked out some of his content. Extremely well spoken and analytical for an 18-year-old Magic player, and also is just mainlining Premodern. Just only plays Premodern Magic and is younger than Premodern Magic by a lot.
I already put in 3 miles of walk and a 5K weighted today, right? Like I train cardio so that I can be
a good Magic player.
8 at a that's literally why I started.
All right, okay? Next take.
Like,
Burn.
I don't need any of this, hiding behind.
I like this side. You heard it here first. Maintain the 14-hour day. We got Chris DiBiase. Burn
also,
can handle.
Why is Rich complaining? He literally won the last 2. Both of them, he finished in first.
The second one he couldn't play on site, but that's an on site problem. Or the first one he can play on site.
I lost a top 8 match because the venue closed.
All right, Mike. All right, moving on. Iron Lungs. Burn can handle Dreadnought with the right blueprint, and that blueprint leads to a build that is strong against the field as a bonus. Chris, of course, talking about himself.
Bullshit.
He had the honor of defeating me, and so I've played Blue-White Dreadnought in like about 20 rounds, and I am 0-3 versus Burn with my Blue-White Dreadnought.
While doing the dishes today, I thought about this, and I'm like, I try to have this thing where I'm like, I lie to everybody. If you're a storyteller, you're lying constantly. That's the, Loki is the god of stories, right? But like, it's not always malicious when you lie, but you lie to everyone. I'm like, I try not to lie to myself about things that are important. And one of the things that's most important to me is the red deck. And I think that's bullshit. I was just like, I play this through my head all the time, where if I had won the last round of Lobstercon last year,
you just would have gotten crushed by Dreadnought.
Would I have been a scythe through back-to-back champion Selden? And even if I were, there was another Dreadnought deck waiting in the finals, right? Like, I play this through my head all the time. I'm like, to what degree do I really believe?
All right, let's distance ourselves from you for a second. We
can't distance ourselves. And not on this one, Lanny. This one is close to my heart.
And talk about whether or not Goblin Patrol and Goblin Cadets is good against Dreadnought, because I think it is.
Then it invalidates the second half of Chris's statement.
That would be the deck that's good against the field.
Yeah, because those cards are horrible.
Okay.
Goblin Cadet against Oath of Druids. That's your.
I mean, Oath of Druids isn't very popular right now.
What happened? What's the interaction between Goblin Cadets and Argothian Enchantress?
Hilarious.
Yeah, how's that one?
We'll see.
Not good.
We'll see if it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Okay. For what it's worth, what would you do differently in your Burn deck to defeat the I always have Solitary Confinement in play deck?
Every time I've ever played Burn and succeeded with it, it was because the stars aligned a certain way, and that's the end of it.
All right.
I had plot armor.
Some people think that Unchained, you shouldn't be allowed to play Dreadnought. I'll just address this really quickly. SWB was like, I didn't want to think too hard about what I was doing on day one, so I added 4 Force of Will to my Dreadnought deck. I wanted to play Magic. I didn't want to play that much Magic, so he just like wanted to play a little Magic. He ends up winning the tournament, and yeah, I think that a Magic tournament, the goal is to win. And if your goal is to win, it shouldn't be to be like, I want to brew around a channel.
Just shut up. I mean, like, this is so stupid. The whole point of the format is to be even dumber, right? Like, we have some things that are dumb to begin with. We're going for extra dumb.
Some people,
don't take your vitamin D vitamins or whatever right before this. We're going for maximum dumb.
Yeah, I agree that if you're playing Unchained, you should be going for the throat. I think it's really cool that Sonny wanted to play Food Chain Goblins. I think it's really cool that people wanted to bring out their brews and do some cool stuff. But like, this isn't Spice Paradise. This is still like a tournament. Like it's like, I think that the problem I have is there's like you just like weren't creative enough. You just added Force of Will to Dreadnought. I'm just like, why don't you just like be more creative than that and play a deck that beats Force of Will and Dreadnought? Like, build better decks. Okay.
The point of it is not to be the most creative. At least unless it's like a tournament where you're supposed to be the most creative. The purpose is to, I don't know. I guess SWB's purpose was to play a certain amount of Magic.
Yeah, right? He just wanted to hang. I mean, he wanted to like play in the tournament. He didn't want to play in the normal one because it would have gone too long. But
I would have played in Shocklands if they hadn't canceled Shocklands.
SWB gets 0 shit from us, and if it wasn't our friend, I would still say the same thing, which is get good nerds. JVL likes to cut the tails off for a fancy dinner with the wife and use the rest for soup. My response is pretty simple. The lobster claw is just as good as the tail, so I would probably eat those separately too and then make that lobster bisque. Gabe Menendez confesses to angle shooting in the main event. Good on you, bud. Appreciate that.
What does that mean?
He said that he Mike Longed his opponent by revealing his hand and accepting a concession even though he didn't have lethal, because like one of his creatures was summoning Sith.
I mean, yeah, that's great. And also, I don't know, man, it's pre-modern. Sounds also great. I don't know. It's hard to say.
And he wants people to play more janky decks on day 2.
I would love it if we all just played at the same level.
Right?
I feel like some people just donate equity to jerks. Right? If we're all playing at the same level, then nobody's donating equity to jerks.
Yeah, I mean that's
some people are sharks and everybody else is like
Yeah. We have to save this one for another podcast because
not cutting decks.
It's a little too deep. We have to save this one for another podcast. Enemy fetch lands.
No, just no more. Don't even ask.
Yeah, this one kind of interests me because it's tough because it's like I am interested in what the metagame would look like, but I'm just like
it's just can already get a plane.
Yeah, that's true. But it's just not the format. I mean, the format. Would the format be better though? Is that the question? No. Okay. Over.
Part of the format's grace and charm is in its constraint, right?
Yeah. Of course. I mean, that is definitely one of the more interesting things. And who knows? Maybe black would still be a horrible color. And anyways, the Shocklands events and the Enemy Fetch Lands events get run, and they're fun, and you kind of have an outlet for that. But yeah, there's a certain spirit here that we're just like not.
I also think that the formality of the event is like one thing. We're just like, this is literally what we have, and then we have a small band list.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you just start like, you know what? I think Lightning Helix should get played.
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
Why? I'm like, I like it. It's a good card. Okay.
I mean, I think it's at least somewhere in the middle where it's just like, hey, we have this format and also these other 5 fetch lands are legal. I don't think that would be like a huge deal, but I also think that it's like not a huge deal in the other direction. So it's just like, if it ain't broke,
next
don't
you're gonna have
it.
Premodern Commander precons. That's what you're gonna.
I don't think that necessarily means that.
Straight to Premodern printings is what.
Will Hurst Premodern is in the best place it's ever been. No unbans or bans.
Oh, it is in a great. I mean, look, we had 18 for the league this week. Can you imagine? Right, like I don't know how long you've been serious in the format, or we're just literally 3 rounds on every Thursday night. There was just rando 18 this week.
Yeah,
new players who I've never seen before.
Yep,
it is, and people are paying entries, et cetera, et cetera.
And are they complaining about Parallax Tide?
No,
and Dreadnought.
And the tournament
and
is
Mary's
over.
Guile.
Tournament is over, and people are just, and the kitchen closes, or they're just like, we're closing the kitchen. Tournament's over. People are just still huddled around playing for fun.
Yeah,
right. Like, what could be better?
We have somebody who basically contends that pre-modern players are pulling their punches and not playing Tide decks as much as they should.
I mean, this is a complicated one. The answer is obviously yes, but you don't know what the psychology of people is, right? Like I said, I want to play a different deck all the time. I would love to play black-white control, except for mana control decks are some of the best decks. So like I'm gonna severely hamper my ability to win if I do that. But that person is probably right.
That's interesting. I think that it's not as true as they think it is. I think that people,
I don't know how much they think it is.
Yeah. Well, I'll share one data point. Dreadnought was the most popular deck at Lobstercon, the highest representation out of any deck at Lobstercon. So I think that indicates that people listen to Spike Colony podcast, and as a result, they play the deck that is good. And as a result, we actually saw something that was like pretty reasonable, which is like overall it got 50% win rate, and it put somebody in the top 8. And that's exactly what happens to decks in formats that are really good. They get played by a lot of people.
One played deck, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, the win rate goes down because you have dilution of talent.
Yeah. I mean, that's one aspect of it. But like, if all the cream rose to the top, if you have that many people, sure, it's a 50% win rate, but you would still expect like 4 in the top 8. Instead, I think you just get some stratification. Like, I don't think that. I mean, we'll see. Obviously, time takes for it to spread out. Man.
100% conversion rate from Devourer is what I hear.
Yeah. So that goes on to my next one, which is Mike Arnold. My hot take is the Devourer players got lucky, and my answer to Mike Arnold is the Devourer players would agree with you. They think that they got lucky as well.
Anybody who makes top 8 in a tournament got lucky.
Yeah, but
100% of the people.
The subtext here is that it won't happen again, right? So the subtext here is that they won't get as lucky again. Whereas, do you think Rich Shea is going to get lucky again?
I think that if they ran an old school / pre-modern tournament next week, Rich Shea would probably win.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Like,
so,
like, okay, what do you think? What do you think the correct
odds
line is on Rich Shea? Like, minus? Is it plus 250? Is it minus 140?
It's like probably like bet 100 to win 325.
Yeah, so it's minus 325.
Something like that. I always forget what the plus or minus should be.
Minus is like you bet 100.
100 to win. Is that? Okay, whatever. That's
plus. So if it's plus 125, it means you bet 125 to get 100. Okay. If it's minus 325, you bet 100.
Okay, yeah. So it's all going to be minuses because obviously it's not going to be. It's not going to pay 1-to-1, but it's not going to pay 10-to-1. But yeah, with the Devour players, that deck has a lot of variance. Sometimes you just top deck it. Multiple times the tournament report goes, I was going to die, and then I top deck Fling. And then sometimes it's just like, okay, we played a super grindy matchup. My opponent didn't understand the deck. Yeah, I think people should learn how the Devourer deck works. That one's definitely a gimme. A friend of the podcast, Noah, of course, kind of just forgetting that Fling is an instant. So that kind of stuff just happens when you haven't actually played the matchup. And
I mean, if people don't know that Engineered Plague on Phyrexian,
that's another one.
Strategy
or construct. Unban Necro, basically. What do you think? Agree or disagree?
I haven't tried it. My recollection of playing in formats with Necropotence was that it was consistently a player.
Yeah, okay.
And never did I ever play it in a format where you could play 4 Ivory Towers. That would not take very long to get out. I saw a list last week with like 3 Ivory Towers. Oh, I saw your list. F- on a lot of your card choices.
Oh, you just play 4 Ivory Towers? My whole point was like, why don't you play more cards that are good with Ivory Tower in case Necro gets contained?
So it's better. So the problem is a lot of the cards that you wanted to play, like
Skeletal Scrying and Deep Analysis.
Skeletal Scrying are at odds with Necro on a fundamental basis. So like they are similar insofar that they pay life for cards. But the thing that it is different with Necropotence and those kinds of cards is that those cards also require you to pay mana for cards, right? So Skeletal Scrying pays more mana than the amount of cards that you get, right? Deep Analysis has a pretty deep amount of mana that you have to pay in order to get cards, right? But the thing that is fundamental about Necropotence is that you get cards for life, but not for mana. And so that influences the kinds of cards that you will play, right? So you want to play like cards like Spinning Darkness and Ivory Tower and Unmask, cards that cost very little mana, because you're constantly replenishing your hand without spending mana. At the point that you start spending mana, the rest of your deck breaks down in terms of its ability.
Well, I mean, if the view of the deck before was spending all your mana on Drain Life and Corrupt, I can't imagine that you wouldn't just want to you couldn't look for a middle ground here where instead of spending my idea is quite simple. It's just okay, every deck that contains Necropotence will win the game when Necropotence is on the battlefield at any point in the game.
I mean, that's probably not true.
So yeah, because sometimes they're playing burn, but I'm interested in, is this deck too good? Because this is basically the same thing that kind of happened with land tax. It's if you triggered land tax, your ability to win the game went up. It was more nuanced than that. You could contain it, but similarly, Necro is just okay, you have Necro, but games got really interesting when land tax was disenchanted, and I think games could get interested if Necro gets annulled or dressed.
So Necro is pretty easy to contain. It's one of the reasons why, I think it has this kind of legendary, Michael Jordan reputation. Michael Jordan was good, but he wasn't God. Okay, some sort of this legendary reputation. But people forget there were just really basic ways that you could beat Necropotence, right? Necropotence is fundamentally very mana hungry. Cards like Stasis and Winter Orb are insane against Necropotence. If you just have a Winter Orb in play, it counters all of the Necro card advantage. You could have 100 cards in hand, you can't do anything.
So you're just saying Necro's fine.
I'm saying it was a player always, and that. But think about how much worse your cards get in a context where people are informed and they know they should be playing Winter Orb as one of their as one of their tools against Necropotence.
This is an argument for Necropotence in the format. It would be a player. It would be able to be contained.
Oh no, I'm just saying like your deep analysis and skeleton.
That's fine. But let's address the take.
Yeah,
it would be a player and it would be contained. So we'd have a interesting black deck that would not be unbeatable because you have tools.
I would rather Necropotence than if we're only unbanning one.
No. It's either we don't unban anything or we unban Necro.
I think I'd rather not unban anything. I think the format is great right now. I don't think it needs a shake-up. Maybe in a year it might need a shake-up. But right now it's best ever.
Okay.
Why would you shake up best ever?
That's the take.
I just want to say I would rather unban Necropotence than unban Entomb, and I would rather unban Yogg-Will than unban Necropotence.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to reopen Yogg-Will, mostly just because I don't want to buy LEDs, but I can always borrow them from Levine. Do you even have LEDs?
I only own one, I think.
Yeah, so you need some LEDs, and then you might ask for your intuitions back for your Yogg-Will deck, in which case that would be really bad for me. So. Avoiding that.
So Yogg-Will, we're not voting for that one as an unban.
I think that it's pretty great on power level because I played it in the Big Apple Highlander and I was just like, oh, because I've never played with the card outside of Cube, and like it's amazing in Cube and it's amazing in Big Apple Highlander, and I'm like, if I have 4 copies, like it says draw 10 cards on it. It says draw 20 cards on it. Like,
did I ever tell you like
you got to choose what cards they are with
an argument that game ends when you cast the Gentleman's Agreement. You
don't have to show them. Yeah.
The one that's really the broken one is Yawgmoth's Bargain. If that gets in play, the game.
That goes to my next one, which is David Thomas Tao with Bargain should be unbanned immediately. Sounds like you disagree.
I don't know what experience he's had with Yawgmoth's Bargain. Like that game ends.
So ban show and tell and keep Bargain ?
Why?
Yeah. Okay. Detail also says
it makes. I mean, it creates a very okay. Imagine you have the Dance Academy deck for a second, right? I mean, obviously, just start there. I don't know where we end up, right? But like, you just like Rector out Bargain on turn 2 or whatever, where you still
there wouldn't be the Dance Academy deck. It would just be called Academy, and the way it would win is with Yawgmoth's Bargain and not Suture Duel or Arcanus.
Like you would just pay 1 life and draw a card
instead of getting Arcanus and Mind Over Matter in play at the same time somehow.
You probably wouldn't use cards that cost 6. You probably I don't know if like a Scourge Familiar is the right thing. When Zvi did it, he just had like a bazillion. Like Artifact mana is just good in the abstract, right? So
I will add that Bargain was absolutely disgusting in my Big Apple Highlander deck as well. I mean, you don't have Mana Vault, so there's interesting stuff like that. Detail also says there's 2 to 3 underexplored tribal decks that could be borderline tier 1 archetypes within 4 months.
Tier 1?
Borderline.
What tribes is he looking at?
Yeah, I don't know. I will shout out Birds, which got 2nd place in an event using Soraya the Falconer, a card that is not in print on Magic Online because it is so unplayable, but it is a Bird Lord. So shout out to that pilot. And of course, Clerics is getting the cook on. He says 2 to 3. I guess Clerics, but also they're white, or I don't know, soldiers. Elves is interesting. Elves is an interesting one without Survival of the Fittest.
But why?
Rebels,
I mean, it's like
Rebels. You're all about Rebels.
Fire deck.
Merfolk.
You're like, why would you ever do this as long as Survival Anger is available?
Okay, Merfolk. Yeah.
No.
Okay. Next year, a deck with 4 Survival and 4 Sylvan Library will top a Lobstercon. I happen to agree with this. I think that 4 Sylvan Library
and 4 Sylvan Library.
Yeah, I happen to agree with this. I think that Sylvan Library. This will be for another podcast, but I kind of tilted Rich Shea off the planet because I was just like, Sylvan Library is tempo. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, Sylvan Library is tempo. And I wasn't saying it for him, and I'm not saying it for you. I'm saying it for me. Because the card looks like it's supposed to be card advantage. But it turns out that it's not card advantage at all. And it really, and the reason why I've always underrated it, and the reason why I always thought it sucked was because I was just like, why would I play this card when I can play anything else?
I have one thing to say about Sylvan Library. I only have one thing to say, which is the reason that you can play it is because it's only good in a deck where if the opponent has Swords to Plowshares, you just draw 3 or 4 extra cards. That's it.
Sylvan Library is tempo. I'll save that one for the next episode. So you disagree that a 4 survival 4 Sylvan deck will top a Lobstercon?
I can't even imagine a deck I would want to play that had 4 copies of both of those.
Smother is the format's second best removal spell.
Not true.
What's the second best removal spell?
I can name 3 or 4 that are all better than Smother.
What's holding you back?
Breath is better than Smother.
Okay. What about Reprisal?
Lightning Bolt is better than Smother.
Bolt was pretty obvious, yeah.
Right? I think Lava Dart, your favorite, is better than Smother.
Yeah, disgusting. Okay.
You know what else is better than Smother? Overload. That kills a creature that you might need to smother.
Unintentional draw talk is kind of in here. So, like, what are we saying? Do double elimination instead. Do draws are 0 points. We've kind of talked about this at length.
This
and there's
is worse
just like,
than me. You know, like you're just like, oh, Mike, you overrate whatever just happened, right? Like somebody got salty because they had an unintentional draw, and I don't want to change the rules.
There was a lot of unintentional draws at Lobstercon that was like somebody was dead and they like didn't scoop. And
yeah, and you still had a clean cut to top.
It's pretty much been a thing that's kind of happening a lot now. And
I mean, I put this in the Discord. I had 3 unintentional draws 2 years ago.
I think let's just do orb flips. I think we should literally just do orb flips. And
no, but that's also BS. I was going to win all 3 of the ones that.
Well, then practice orb flips. Finish the game or practice flipping orbs is all I'm saying. And Andy, last minute, best version of Gush, Mox Diamond, Meddling Mage doesn't play green, at least not main deck.
Andy's a smart guy.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's saying that there's a hypothetical flippy grow deck that could be good, and the not playing green is like you don't have access to Sylvan Library, which is tempo. So I don't know.
That's, you know what I mean? The main thing is with green is just the card Kyrian Triad, right?
Yeah, I mean you could just play Bryson's Cataclysm, 2 Wayfarer, 2 Wasteland, Mom, Exalted Angel, Psychotog deck that has Gush, Mox Diamond. You can just do that.
I think Andy played that at the league this week. I think.
Yeah, that's just a thing that you're allowed to do. Mike, what's your hot take?
What's my hot take? I don't know, man. I talked about Stasis for an hour and a half already.
We talked about Stasis for an hour and a half, and then we did like a 10-minute add-on an hour later too.
I think that Iron Man decks are at the apex of their popularity and don't deserve to be there right this second.
Wait, so you're saying, so basically Terrageddon and Black Green Survival.
Terrageddon in particular.
Terrageddon, that's my take too. Terrageddon's horrible.
I was talking to Detail this week about like, he's just like talking to me about the survival version. What's it called? Like backyard cookout or whatever it's called.
Corned beef hash.
Corned beef hash. Okay, like he's like, oh, well, you have this and this, and I'm like, I don't see how this is better than, just the Oath sideboard package, right? And he's just like, I tried it, don't like it. I'm like, oh man, maybe all of these ideas suck. Like none of these decks could beat Hoth. That's where I landed. I'm like if you are, we had this discussion, me, SWB, Lan, and Andy had a discussion. It's like, all right, you're Hoth, and your opponent plays a forest. What card could they possibly play that you don't win 100% of the time? Right? That was the question. And then somebody was just like Hermit Druid, and then I said decks with Hermit Druid don't have forest. And so no one could come up with a deck.
I think you could just win on turn 3 with elves.
Right? With elves, right? Yeah, like that's it.
Like you can Tangle Wire as well, so you don't have to win on turn 3.
Obviously can win. It's not 100%, but like if your opponent's not, first of all, you're still advantaged as Hoth, and if they don't just turn 3 kill you or whatever, like what deck with forest can potentially beat Hoth?
Yeah, I mean, if the deck's only goal is to beat green decks, though, or not only goal, but if that's like the strength of it, you can probably conceive of a number of decks that do that. Like Replenish itself is just very good against basic forest as well.
Yeah, but it's also advantaged against Dreadnought, right? So I think like that's like the main difference. It also has so obviously in terms of its Dreadnought, I'm sorry, it's in terms of its replenish capabilities, Hoth is a worse replenish deck than replenish. But like the fact that it auto beats Devourer 50% of the time is actually pretty meaningful.
I mean, it's I think that you overrate Blessing or Corrosion Reclamation effects against Devourer. I also think that
I got beat by land this way.
That's why you feel that way.
Hand slapped, right? That's why I feel this way.
Let me tell you about one of Chris or one of Rich Shea's losses in the Swiss. He played against Devourer. Game 1, he lost to Devourer. Game 2, he won because of Gaia's Blessing. What do you think happened in Game 3?
His opponents did not go for the
yeah. So like now it's a few weeks later, a few months later, and your opponent sees that you're playing a lot of Rich Shea's cards. Yeah. So I think you're losing a lot of edge, especially if you listen to the Spike Colony podcast and you're like, oh, like
there are people who play Premodern who try these decks who don't necessarily, they're not up on all the technology.
My hot take is that nobody's going to play Devourer at Sacred Torch Showdown. All 60 or 70, we're at cap now, and cap is like 72 players. Shout out to all the people who signed up. There is, of course, a wait list, so check out mtgnyc.com to get on the wait list. Shout out to homies. I missed a take. Dom Harvey. The hype around BG Survival is absurd for a deck that clearly has deep structural flaws.
I would have played it in Shocklands.
Don't get me started on the Tempting Worm Psyop.
What is the Psyop?
I
said it was the worst Tempting Worm deck.
Well, you're not part of the Psyop. Sounds like you agree with Dom on that one.
It is. I think Tempting Worm is a very good card. I was like high on Tempting Worm from a long time ago. It is not a good Tempting Worm deck. It can't exploit the Tempting Worm very well.
All right, we're just jumping around here. I dropped a Stasis list from Danny DeRoy in the Discord. He went a little 4-1 in the pod round. This is Bant Stasis with 3 Gaia's Blessing, an Exploration, an Enlightened Tutor, a Seal of Cleansing, a Wellspring. No, it's a Wellspring. When Wellspring comes into play, gain control of Enchanted Land. At the end of each of your turns, lose control of Enchanted Land. At the beginning of each of your turns, gain control of Enchanted Lands. So you annex, and then you tap it, I guess, under your Stasis.
All right, this is just a joke, right?
You can borrow your opponent's Mishra's Factory so that both of you can take turns hitting each other with it.
No, you just tap it for the Stasis, right?
Yeah. But if you don't have Stasis, you can borrow your friend's Mishra Factory. He's got 1 Tide in the main as well, and a Pendrel Mists. What do we think about Pendrel Mists?
That's just the propaganda that kills, right?
Yeah, well, it's the Tabernacle that's a 4-mana enchantment.
I like propaganda for 2 reasons. One of them is because it gives your opponent hope, and hope is the most pernicious thing. Right, like Pendulum is like, oh, my guy's gonna die. I can't pay into this indefinitely. But like propaganda, they're like, I can kind of do this. I'm gonna like.
So it just makes your opponent play the game for longer to put you closer towards an unintentional draw.
Them into not winning. So I like that.
It gets you closer to your Felden's Cane.
You know, when we made the propaganda decks back in '97, I want to say, like the Altran Flying Beatdown deck, the whole core argument to it was propaganda over Pendrel Mists because propaganda is asymmetrical. Pendrel Mist is symmetrical, which doesn't seem like it matters a lot in this case because
there are no creatures in 75.
Doesn't play a lot of creatures.
Aside from the creature land that you might Wellspring, but then it doesn't get triggered.
But notably, the Chris Roy deck does win with a creature, right? And so the asymmetry of propaganda actually matters there. When I identified this, I'm like, oh, okay, then the right way to do this with our propaganda mana control deck is to play creatures, and that's how we get an advantage. Pendrel Mists is actually fundamentally stronger than propaganda in a creatureless deck, but it's got to be worse. It costs 4 mana and it's only 1 mana tax instead of 2 mana tax. So like that's I think I'd.
What if the creature is a Anurid Brushhopper?
Does that come back untapped all the time?
It doesn't matter because it means it'll perpetually be under Vice, but it does come back untapped.
I feel like if all they're doing is trying to, no, then propaganda is better. They can't attack you.
That's true.
Right?
Okay.
Like that's way better.
What about
right? What
about Pendulum Mist Propaganda Split?
I was only going to be on 2. The fact that propaganda costs 3 instead of 4 is the biggest thing to me.
So you could play 2 propagandas and 1 Pendulum Mists.
I don't know how many Pendulum Mists I own. I know I own at least 4 propagandas.
All right, so we'll play up to 1 Pendulum Mist if we can find one.
I do love these Gaia's Blessings, man. But this smacks of my idiot deck from the PSS 3 years ago.
I think Treva's Ruins. I mean, we've got 4 Forsaken City, which I hate, but we've got 4 Treva's Ruins turning on the green and white splash.
Oh my god, there are 5 dragon layers in this deck?
There's a Dromar's Cavern hiding over here. I mean, my only comment on this is if you want to draw your colored sources, you have to play Portent, and there's only 2 Impulse even here. So
this is not a serious deck.
Well, it seriously is in the top 16 of the monthly. Shout out to Danny DeRoy, always giving us different looks at things, notably the innovator of Mono Blue Fluctuator, in addition to being a hardcore replenish player for quite some time. All right. Our takes are the same. Terragon's really bad. I
think like all the green mid-range decks are overrated.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that's come to so basically the arc of the Spy Colony podcast was Meddling Mage is amazing, it's best creature in the format, and then it turned into Meddling Mage is unplayable because Call of the Herd is the best creature in the format, into Meddling Mage is amazing again because Call of the Herd sucks.
Nobody plays Call of the Herd. Yeah.
Well, no, people play Call of the Herd and they're getting kegged and dominated and Parallax waived. So Call of the Herd is like literally it's still one of my favorite cards like in Premodern. I still think it's a great card. I still think, all the green decks should be playing it. It's just really bad against Powder Keg, Dominate, and Parallax Wave.
I do love that this deck has Ray of Revelation.
You're just trying to talk yourself into Bant Stasis.
I'm not going to play the Wellspring. I'll tell you right now. I would rather have a second Parallax.
You're not going to Enlighten Tutor for Wellspring? That doesn't appeal to you?
The Parallax side seems pretty good.
I think the Parallax side seems awesome. I mean, you're already
it's synergistic with the Claws of Gix.
The other thing that's exciting is that
that's 0 mana to sacrifice, right?
Yeah, no, it's 1 mana.
Oh, okay. Never
but if you want 0 mana to sacrifice, may I interest you in Despotic Scepter?
Oh man, you were not there at Cam's Halloween party where we were just talking about Despotic Scepter and like Hacker was supposed to go, and I was like calling Hacker, and be like, "How come you're not here?" Because like he had the Despotic Scepter deck at Pro Tour Rome.
You have told this story on the podcast before.
I have. I have a finite number of stories.
Yeah, I know. All of us do, actually. But the Despotic Scepter could be interesting here. I still love the Claws of Gix. Sometimes the life total totally matters. Andy beat me at the Connecticut tournament we went to he stayed alive with Claws of Gix. Yeah.
With the Lodestone Bobble deck.
So the thing that I'm most excited about playing Parallax Tide in my Stasis deck is that allows me to play maybe 1 or 2 Stifle in my Stasis deck. And once I have 1 or 2 Stifle in my Stasis deck, I all of a sudden am better against my opposing Brain Freezes and Anorid Brush Hoppers. So
this deck wins with... this deck is just so good because of Gaia's Blessing.
Yeah, it's got infinite vices. You're just wins. No, it can win with any of its cards all the time at all times. And can even stifle, if you add Stifle to your deck, you can stifle those pesky Phyrexian Furnaces going after your Gaia's Blessings.
I'm cutting Wellspring, but maybe this is a good... I think Propaganda is better than Pendulum Mists. You don't lose to any utility creatures, do you?
Anorid Brush Hopper and Psychotog.
Not losing to Anorid Brush Hopper.
Psychotog.
How am I going to lose to Psychotog if I have Propaganda?
Tireless Tribe. Well, it only has to attack once, so they just they have 2 mana.
I have 4 chains.
I mean, they're a Psychotog deck. They could fight over it. But Tireless Tribe.
Attack me for 1. That deck doesn't even have a Bout Face in the deck anymore.
Lightning Angel.
Wait, how many chills are in the sideboard here? 0?
Wait, can we switch up? Can we just play 8 layers? Can we play black, red, blue layer and white, black, blue layer, and then play Lightning Angel in our Stasis deck? Can we Oath of Druids for Lightning Angel? I know you can Oath of Druids for a Chroma, but hear me out. Why don't we just Oath of Druids for Lightning Angel, and then we can also cast Lightning Angel?
Wait, but how do we trigger the Oath?
Sometimes we don't.
Because in the game where we want this, they don't have the Oath anymore, right? Like if you're playing against Oath Pollution, they're not going to have Oath.
It's true. But you have Lightning Angel, so you can cast Lightning Angel using mana. So you have to play Mox Diamond.
This is terrible. Also,
sometimes you can pitch your Mox Diamond to Forsaken City. Think about it.
All right, that also seems like a great matchup to me.
Oath Pollution?
Yeah.
We've talked about this matchup at length on this podcast, and every single time, Oath Pollution just wins somehow. Like, every time.
Seems like a great matchup.
It won in the Super Gauntlet. It won on video with Fran. Fran's always like, oh, it was super close, but I won.
So it's 25 lands, but 5 of them are layers. 4 of them are Forsaken Cities. I could just play a third Black Vice instead of the Wellspring.
I like that I completely pushed you off whatever you were about to do by just sending you Danny's list, and you're like, everything but the Wellspring I'm in.
The Exploration I might not be in. We just go 4 Black Vice to this, maybe second 4 Black Vice, at least 3 Black Vice, second Propaganda. I think I'm in.
All right, do it up.
Oh wait, there's only 2 Impulse and 4 Gush in this deck.
That's the problem. It's using Enlightened Tutor, and you have to give up something for the Blessing, and most of the time for Blessing you have to give up Selection. So,
all right, I'm in. I'll play this week.
I think you should probably play Sylvan Library in your Stasis deck, or you can play Miri's Guile, but that way you're just always going to draw an island. That's perfect.
No, but I can't play it on turn 1.
Yeah, so then you play Miri's Guile.
No, I can't play Miri's Guile on turn 1.
You should just tap Forsaken City for Miri's Guile on turn 1. You know what's better than giving up a card to have the Miri's Guile effect? Is giving up two cards. All right, fine. Windswept Heath, Basic Forest.
Oh my god, so bad.
You pulled my leg. All right, this is the Love Spy Colony part of the podcast.
All right, I'm into this now. I went from not into this to very into this.
Yeah, you can. So Thawing Glaciers in one forest. I've heard of people doing this.
I didn't have a forest. That's how dumb I was. I thought about it a lot. I didn't have it.
All right. Well,
all right.
You can
Love Spy Colony. Bye.
Love Spy Colony.
Oh, Lanny, cut out the part where I said like which one is minus and plus. I don't remember what I said now, but there's 50% likelihood that I said it wrong.
I'm not going to cut that part out, but what I will do is Google it right now.
No. So I know what the right thing is, and I just don't know if I said it right. If it's minus, it means that side is favored.
All right, so then then you said the wrong thing because you said you said minus 325 on Rich, and it should be plus 325. It should be plus
325. So minus is favored, right? So just cut it out.
I can't.
Why?
Because I can't find it. I don't take show notes. I don't organize anything. I literally take the recording, I cut the beginning or end off based on what's happening, and then at
least leave this part though.
Yeah, I'm leaving this part. I haven't hit stop recording.
I think I might have just said it wrong. That's the
plus is on underdogs, minus is on favorites.
Yeah.
And that's only 1-to-1, right? So plus 100 or minus 100 is the same. It's 100. It's 100 to win 100.
It's yeah. So it's 100 to win 100.
Yeah. And so plus or minus 100 is the same. That's like the baseline. Plus 200 pays 2-to-1. Minus 200 pays 1-to-2. So
plus 200 is you pay 100 to get 200.
Yeah.
Minus 200 is you pay 100. You pay 200 to get 100.
Yeah, we'll get better at this. But minus for favorites, plus for whatever. So Shea is not, minus 125, but he's certainly plus under 500. I would say that's actually wild, right? Because you don't remember, or I don't know. I don't know if you caught up with this part of the podcast where I told SWB that like if Kai Buddha wanted to win Lobstercon next year, he just would. Like, what would you put odds that Kai, if Kai Buddha decided that he wanted to win Lobstercon 2026, what odds would you put on him winning Lobstercon 2026?
I mean, 100%.
Yeah. I was saying he would do it 1 in 3 times, just so that I could make it like if I was a casino, I couldn't do 100%. Right?
He won 4 straight Pro Tours.
Yeah, I know.
He won top. Like it was like, oh man, Nathan Sawyer is really good. He made 2 top 8s. And we're like, oh man, Mr. Checklist card is really good. Look at his persistence. Blah blah blah. Like that wasn't his whole run, right? Then he won another Pro Tour after top 8ing the one that he didn't win. Then he made more Pro Tours.
All right.
Top 8s. Then his first Pro Tour back after like a 5-year hiatus, he top 8'd.
All right. Kai Buddha wins Lobstercon 2026. It sounds like you're doing minus 500.
I don't know, like maybe minus 750.
Minus 750. I'll do. So I said Rich was 325, so that means I have to do something like plus 150 on Kai Buddha.
You're crazy.
you're like, I'll take it. I'm gonna take this all day.
You need the plane out of Germany to.
You would just
to not leave the tarmac.
So you're putting your net worth on that one then.
I mean,
gun to your head.
Gun to my head. I don't know if I'd take it at minus 750, but I would take it at way better odds than what you're saying. You would
take it at plus 125.
He's yeah.
All right.
Spike Colony.
You heard it here first, Love Spike.
We're done now. Right?
Second Love Spike Colony. No, we're still not done. We're not done until I click the button.
Click the button.
All right. Love Spike Colony again.
Don't put that part in.
I'm not putting that part in. I just hit record. So people have no idea what you're referring to. But the part that we are going to put in is that, Mike, we didn't get into what happens when you wellspring your own land.
I don't. What happens?
When you cast Wellspring targeting your own land, your opponent doesn't get it, and it untaps every upkeep for you.
Why?
Because of how the card is worded. The Oracle text of Wellspring is enchant land. When this aura enters, gain control of enchanted land until end of turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, untap enchanted land. You gain control of that land until end of turn. So if you just target island,
2-card combo.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Maybe I'll play Wellspring.
Yes, Wellspring and Stasis. Let's go. Somebody like posted. They're like, did you do the Wellspring trick that often? And Danny was just like, oh, I did it. I did it at some point. And we're like in the Discord, like, what's the Wellspring trick? Do you like Wellspring their wasteland? Do you like, it's like, no, you just Wellspring your own island and then you have Stasis. Love Spike Colony Addendum.